Good evening, everyone. Could you remain standing, please, for prayers from Pastor Chris Reveley from Northwood Hills Evangelical Church.
Can we start by focusing upon God and His goodness towards us, using words taken from Psalm 145? We exalt you, O God the King. We praise your name forever and ever. Great is the Lord and most worthy of praise. His greatness no one can fathom. The Lord is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and rich in love. The Lord is trustworthy in all he promises and faithful in all he does. The Lord upholds all who fall and lifts up all who are bowed down. The Lord is near to all who call on him, to all who call on him in truth. My mouth will speak in praise of the Lord. Let every creature praise his holy name forever and ever. Amen. Amen. Secondly, we will pray for the peace and prosperity of our city. Almighty God, we give you thanks for all your blessings upon the London Borough of Hillingdon. We thank you for all the resources and social services available to us, and for the safe and pleasant environment that most experience living in Hillingdon. We thank you for the access we have to employment and to leisure opportunities, for our schools and hospitals, for houses, transportation and shops, and for all the freedoms that we enjoy in this country. As a community, we thank you for all those who serve us, care for us and keep us safe in this borough. Especially tonight, I thank you for each and every councillor and for their commitment and dedication to spend their time serving our local community. We do want to pray for those in our community who are struggling with life. Particularly we pray for the elderly, the isolated, the disadvantaged, the sick and the vulnerable, asking that our social and medical services will be able to help them and return to them a sense of personal worth. We pray for any who feel marginalised, that they will be drawn into society rather than feeling excluded by it. We pray for those who are anxious or fearful, that they may find comfort and have a growing sense of security, and especially we ask for a holding back of the evils of violent crime and for our police as they seek to protect us all. Overall, we pray that we may all learn to love our neighbour as ourselves, and that our community will be marked by increasing evidence of people supporting and caring for each other and being good neighbours one to the other. We ask this in the name of the one known as the Good Shepherd, who cares for each and every one of us. Amen. Amen. Finally, may I pray for you all and for tonight's council meeting. What does the Lord require of you? The prophet Micah provided the answer, which is that we should each act justly and love mercy and walk humbly with our God. As you consider the agenda for tonight's meeting, let us just take a moment in silence to consider for each issue what justice, mercy and humility might look like. Almighty God, as councillors engage with the various items on the agenda, may you give to them wisdom to do what is good and right for our country, for our city, for our local community. We pray, O God, that you will lead the council to make wise decisions, knowing that the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy, impartial, and sincere. And now may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord turn his face to you and give you peace. Amen. Amen.
Thank you very much. Also, can I ask everyone to remain standing a minute's silence for Arthur Preston, who passed away on the 4th of May. Thank you. Okay. Okay, point number 2, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 3 apologies tonight. Councillors Edwards, Riley and Seaman Digby.
Thank you very much. On to the minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before members consider the minutes, could I just make one small amendment? Page 16 of the minutes of the annual council. Councillor Curling was shown as moving an amendment to the recommendation on that page. Unfortunately, Councillor Edgington was not shown as seconding it and speaking on it, which he was. So if you'll accept that, the minutes with that amendment included.
Is that agreed? Thank you very much. Do we have any declarations of interest before tonight's meeting? No? Okay, it's on to me. Good evening, councillors. Before I commence with my announcements, councillors, due to the warm weather on this occasion for our full council meeting, you may remove your jackets. It seems incredible that I'm almost 2 months into my time as Mayor of Hillingdon, and yet it feels like I've only been Mayor for only a few days. How time flies. It is a fantastic honour being Mayor, given the opportunity to give enjoyment to children, recognition to volunteers, and praise to our armed services. How can one not like being Mayor? But what have I been doing over the last 55 days? Over that time, the Deputy Mayor and I have attended over 100 events, from poppy seed planting, and yes, those poppies are starting to flower, to 22 street parties celebrating the royal wedding, from being present at the raising of the flag for the start of Armed Forces Week, to meeting with Jessica Shepherd, from laying a wreath at the Polish War Memorial at St Paul's Cathedral, to inspecting the RAF at their Freedom of the Borough Parade. To me, they are all heroes. I heard the funeral of Betty Thorndike, to watching and listening to Denzel Easton of Douay Martyr School, representing Hillingdon in the Jack Petrie Speak Out Challenge Grand Final. I was lucky enough to see him in the Hillingdon Heats earlier this year. But there are just too many others to mention. Then last week, we had the launch of the Mayor's Charitable Trust 2018-19, which saw 3 inspirational and, in some cases, heartstring-tugging presentations from my charities, followed by the live entertainment of 2 exceptional cellists. A big thank you to everyone who helped make it a success, especially to the fantastic mayoral staff and the in-house caterers, and to the 90-plus guests who attended. Congratulations also to our Rural Activity Centre, who won gold at the Hampton Court Flower Show this week. I believe only 2 gold awards were distributed, and rural activities on their first attempt were lucky to, well, not lucky, earned theirs. And finally, just to squash a rumour, no, I have not changed the mayoral car for a motorbike. Well, not yet, anyway. Okay, item 5, report of Head of Democratic Services, Cllr Ray Puddifoot.
Mr Mayor, there are 5 recommendations contained within this report. The first 2 recommendations are for noting, and I shall move those 2 en bloc. The other 3 recommendations require a decision, and I shall move these individually to allow any required debate. The first item in the report is for the Council to note the use of urgency provision to implement decisions between the 15th of February and 22nd of June as detailed in the agenda. The second item is to note the annual report of the Audit Committee for 2017-18 attached as Appendix A to this agenda. I move these 2 items en bloc.
Are they noted?
Noted.
Done.
The third item in this report requests that Council agree the appointment of Miss Lynn Hill, the Chair of Health Watch Hillingdon, as a statutory voting member for Health Watch Hillingdon on the Health and Wellbeing Board. I so move.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Simmonds.
Mr Mayor, I second and reserve my right.
Thank you very much. Is that any other speakers? Is that agreed? Thank you.
The fourth item refers to some amendments to the Council petition scheme, mainly around including the threshold for the number of signatures required for an e-petition and minor changes required relating to the GDPR. The proposed changes will be reviewed at the end of this municipal year. I move the recommendation as shown on page 30 of the Council agenda.
Councillor Simmonds.
Mr Mayor, I formally second and reserve my right.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other speakers? Councillor Egginton.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. We have some severe concerns about the changes. As you'll be aware, Mr Mayor, over the years there have been further restrictions made by this administration in the petition scheme. Supposedly, it's meant to be made easy. That's the bottom of page 29 on the report. But it's being made more difficult. The idea that the number of online petitioners needs to be 100 seems to suggest that each online petitioner is only worth a fifth of a paper signature, and inevitably that will discourage people who are busy. We've already had various other changes, as I've mentioned. No longer are people who work or study in this borough allowed to be petitioners, although sometimes the things which the council are doing affects them just as much as some of our residents. In addition, I see that there are some further restrictions being proposed, which mean that, for example, if there's been a change to service policies, a petition won't be accepted in those circumstances either. Those are on page 32 on the amended suggestions. So we have some grave concerns about this, Mr Mayor, which we hope can be answered by the leader. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
Mr Mayor, just for the benefit of new members really, and to explain how this process works, so Councillor Puddifoot has moved a motion which is to accept the change to the petition scheme. Councillor Simmonds has seconded but reserved his right. Once the Mayor asks if there are any other speakers, if there aren't, we go back first of all to the seconder who reserved his right. If he doesn't wish to speak, then the person who moved the motion gets the right of reply. They are usually the last person to speak in the debate. So when the Mayor asks if there are any other speakers, please show, because if we go back to the move of the motion, you've lost your chance to speak.
No. Councillor Simmonds? No. Councillor Puddifoot?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As I mentioned at an earlier council meeting, should the Labour group do anything like they have done tonight and introduce something on the night that they haven't given advance warning of, it will just be put to one side without further debate, and that's what will happen tonight. They must learn, they get this in advance. If they have concerns, they need to put them down in writing so we can consider them before the council meeting. Otherwise, they would not be discussed.
We now go to the vote. Is that agreed? That's passed. Councillor Puddifoot.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The final item within this report refers to the Local Government Boundary Commission review of electoral arrangements in Hillingdon. The preliminary stage of this review requires us to propose a number of councillors that are elected at the May 2022 council elections, broadly based on the anticipated electorate in the borough in 2024 and the governance arrangements for decision making. A full report is included at Appendix C, and based on the Commission's criteria, we are proposing that Hillingdon reduces the number of elected councillors by 12 to give a total of 53, which based on current projections would equate to 4,294 electors per elected member. Mr Mayor, I move the recommendation shown on page 33 of the agenda, which recommends that the draft submission attached as Appendix C, subject to minor amendments, be approved for submission to the Local Government Boundary Commission for England.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Councillor Mills.
I second and reserve my right.
Thank you very much. Councillor Curling.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In other authorities, such as Southwark, they've held all party working groups to come up with a united council resolution. That hasn't happened here, and I don't think it's any secret that the way to run, or the way we would like to run the council, is drastically different on both sides of this chamber. We therefore will not be supporting this, and we'll be asking for a recorded vote, and in the meantime we will be submitting our own submission to the Boundary Commission.
Do we have any other speakers? No. Councillor Mills? No. Councillor Puddifoot? No. Well, we go to the vote.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Recorded vote has been called for and supported. Just to remind members and members of the public, this is where each individual councillor is asked to express their vote out loud so it can be recorded in the minutes. So I will be asking in alphabetical order whether you are voting in favour of the recommendation as shown in page 2 of the order paper, against or abstaining. Councillor Ahmad Walana. Cllr Allen. Cllr Arnold. Cllr Barnes. Cllr Bianco. Cllr Birra. Cllr Bliss. Cllr Bridges. Cllr Brightman. Cllr Burrows. Cllr Chamdal. Cllr Chapman. Cllr Troubadour. Cllr Cooper. Cllr Cawthorne. Cllr Curling. Cllr Dennis. Cllr Deville. Cllr Dhillon. Cllr Dott. Cllr Duncan. Cllr Edgington. Cllr Farley. Cllr Flynn. Cllr Fife. Cllr Gardner. Cllr Goddard. Cllr Graham. Cllr Hagger. Cllr Hensley. Cllr Higgins. Cllr Hurrengy. Cllr Jackson. Cllr Kaufman. Cllr Lakmana. Cllr Lavery. Cllr Lewis. Cllr Makwana. Cllr Markham. Cllr Mathers. Cllr Melvin. Cllr Milani. Cllr D Mills. Cllr R Mills. Cllr Money. Cllr Morse. Cllr Nelson. Cllr O'Brien. Cllr Oswell. Cllr Palmer. Cllr Prince. Cllr Puddifoot. Cllr Radia. Cllr Rodriguez. Cllr Sansapuri. Cllr Simmonds. Cllr Singh. Cllr Stead. Cllr Sweeting. Cllr Tuckwell. Mr Deputy Mayor. Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Mayor. That motion is carried. 41 votes to 21.
Thank you very much. We now go on to item 6, So, questions from members. Number 6.3.
Mr Mayor, could I just explain the questions process? It's a 45-minute time limit. It's a chance for individual members to put questions to the Leader or the Cabinet, one question each, and the answer is normally given in the form of an oral answer, although there is an opportunity to give it in a written answer if we run out of time. And after the answer is given, there is a chance for a supplementary question to be asked, which must arise directly out of the original question or out of the answer given. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cllr Arnold.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Would the Leader of the Council please provide an update on the Government's proposal to expand Heathrow Airport?
Cllr Puddifoot.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for your question, Cllr Arnold. Please accept my apology for a rather fulsome answer, but this is a very important issue for this borough. The effect of an expanded Heathrow on the health and well-being of our people and our environment has been and remains a major concern to this administration. I've said a number of times in this chamber that regardless of the colour of central government, if they propose something that we feel will harm our people, we will fight it, and we will fight it hard. Whether it's a Conservative government looking at business and shareholder interests, or a Labour government directed by trade unions, it will make no difference. For Hillingdon residents, this is far too important an issue to be engaged in the usual political knockabout between parties and their supporters. We have a common enemy. Remain focused on that and do not squabble amongst ourselves. As we have a number of new councillors, let me briefly summarise how we have arrived at where we are today. The last Labour government, led by Tony Blair and then Gordon Brown, decided in 2003 to agree to expand Heathrow and confirmed that decision in January 2009. A coalition of 6 local authorities, Greenpeace and the Campaign to Protect Rural England, sought a judicial review of that decision. In March 2010, representing the 6 local authorities, I was present in the High Court when the judge ruled that Heathrow could not be expanded, basically for many of the same reasons that still apply today, which I will come back to in a moment. At the time of the judgment, David Cameron said the third runway should not go ahead, and we're absolutely clear about that. So with the election of the coalition government, expanding Heathrow appeared to be off the agenda for a while. Heathrow Limited began financing the Back Heathrow campaign, and to date have spent tens of millions of pounds promoting expansion, and claim to have managed to get 100,000 people from a large area of the south of England to agree that Heathrow should be expanded. Such a pathetic result is indicative of the lack of support for expansion. Around 2012, Heathrow Limited were threatening to close the airport unless they were allowed to expand, effectively trying to bully us into submission. Boy, had they picked the wrong leader and the wrong administration. What do you do when you're faced with a bully? You stand up to him and you hit him hard. Together with Boris Johnson, who was then Mayor of London, we put together a proposal for the creation of Heathrow Park, containing 45,000 homes, of which 30% would be affordable, the delivery of 66,000 jobs, and a wide range of education, health, public open spaces, and community facilities. Basically saying, if you want to close the airport, we will view it as an opportunity to transform that area of the west of London. At the time, John McDonnell said we will need to counter the threat to jobs campaign that has been funded by Heathrow Airport in the Back Heathrow campaign, and I refer to the interim report of the Airports Commission, which stated that Heathrow is a very substantial site for redevelopment, and supporting the shift of London's economic centre of gravity eastwards to allow for further expected population growth, combined with a major redevelopment of the Heathrow site, is an alluring prospect. I also said at the time, whilst it is apparent that the only senior politician of any party with a clarity of vision to deal with this issue was Boris Johnson, the decision on where to build the new airport is not at that time his to make. Mr Mayor, Heathrow is a cash cow for its overseas investors. They were not going to close it, we all knew that, and after a feeble attempt to affect the May 2014 election result with a campaign that I personally would close the airport, it resulted in an increased Conservative majority. The bully was back in his box and closure was off the agenda. The Davis Commission, having rejected the option for a 4-runway Thames Estuary airport very early on, put forward 3 options: a 3rd runway at Heathrow, lengthening an existing runway at Heathrow, and a 2nd runway at Gatwick. In September 2016, this council passed a motion requesting that the government choose the Gatwick option. However, they chose to proceed with the 3rd runway option, which, after some delay, resulted in the vote on the National Policy Statement on the 25th of June. The Council Constitution makes it clear that I am responsible as leader for making all necessary decisions in pursuit of the Council's policy on Heathrow expansion, In the week before the expansion vote, I spoke to both Boris Johnson and Nick Hurd regarding their position as government ministers and the parliamentary protocol that with a three-line whip they must vote with the government. Boris asked me if I thought that he should resign as Foreign Secretary, and I advised him that this would be the worst course of action for both his constituents and the country that he could take. As I said last week, Boris Johnson has been and remains a tremendous asset to Hillingdon in many ways, but particularly in helping us in the past and going forward in defeating the Heathrow expansion proposal. This will be a long fight, and it's about winning the war, not making a pointless gesture at the first sign of conflict. With Nick, the same rationale applied. Why, when we have concerns about policing from personnel to infrastructure, would he best serve his constituents by such a pointless gesture? I will return to this issue when we debate motions later in the agenda. Whilst it was predicted that the government would win the vote, the majority, 296, was larger than anticipated due to a large number of Labour MPs following the Len McCluskey Union Directive to support expansion. On the day after the vote, and again on Tuesday, our legal team met to discuss their course of action regarding bringing a judicial review in the High Court. There is a 6-week window to do so, and the aim is to issue proceedings by Friday the 3rd of August. The parties to the challenge will be Hillingdon, Wandsworth, Richmond, Windsor and Maidenhead, Hammersmith and Fulham, Greenpeace, TfL, the Mayor of London, and possibly one or two more. A pre-action protocol letter will be issued early next week, followed by our formal request for a judicial review, and we anticipate that a hearing will take place in October. There are numerous grounds for challenging the government policies, and a number of these, including air quality, will be taken forward. We have a second option for judicial review when the development consent order is issued next year, should that be considered necessary, and a number of challenge grounds will be held in reserve for that purpose. Mr Mayor, to protect our residents and our environment, we have a long battle before us, through the High Court, the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court. As I said earlier, we need to concentrate on turning our fire on the common enemy, and I will dismiss as just political stupidity any attempt to divide those who oppose expansion. This is where clear, unambiguous leadership is required, and that is what the Conservative administration in Hillingdon has and will continue to deliver. Hear, hear.
Thank you very much, Councillor Puddifoot. Councillor Arnold, do you have a supplementary?
No, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much. 6.1, Cllr Chamdal, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My question is, can the Cabinet Member please provide an update on the outcome of the recent full Ofsted inspection of children's services in Hillingdon?
Councillor Simmonds.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Cllr Chamdal, for your question. The Ofsted inspection that took place was underway during the time when all of us elected members were very busy fighting elections, and of course for that reason it may have passed a little bit under the radar for many. But a full Ofsted inspection is the opportunity for the regulator of children's social care in England to take a very detailed look at the workings of what the Council does to protect and support the most vulnerable of our younger residents. And in replying to your question, Councillor Chamdal, I'm going to try and give a little bit of the context, to draw out some of the headlines, and also to focus on some specifics in the report which are of particular interest to members in this chamber. The report of the inspectors is quite a substantial document, and it is available on the Ofsted website. In fact, there may be members in the chamber who've already had the opportunity to read it, so I'm not going to spend too much time simply quoting verbatim from it. But there are a number of things which we as elected members should be aware of. I think we should recognise that one of the key findings of the inspectors was that as a borough, and I quote, a child-centred approach is woven into strategic and operational decision-making. And I think that's an appropriate moment to pay tribute to our Chief Executive and other senior managers whose leadership, which was highlighted actually throughout the inspection process, the impact that that has then had on the outcomes for the most vulnerable children when it comes to the frontline practice, which is the major focus of the inspection. And on those areas where there was a need for some improvement, members again who were at the last Cabinet meeting will have noted a new contract which we issued with a view to improving on two of the points that needed improvement: quality of return home interviews and advocacy for children who are in the care system. But looking at some of the things that the inspectors particularly highlighted during their visit, that are also topics which I know are very much on members' minds. Starting with domestic abuse, something which I know a number of elected members have campaigned on very actively over the years. The inspectors found that children assessed to be at risk receive effective interventions to safeguard their welfare. And for those children who may be at risk of sexual exploitation, again, something which we've had particular concerns about in Hillingdon, not uniquely amongst London boroughs, the inspectors found that staff take effective action to reduce risks to children who are considered highly vulnerable and at risk of child exploitation. Turning to those children who are in the care system, coming through the door because we've identified a risk and now we need to think about what it is we do to help them. The inspectors found that the plans drawn up by our staff for children in need of help and protection are a significant strength and are of excellent quality. But of course, the key thing, which we know from all our interactions as elected members, through the Corporate Parenting Board and its reports, and from what we hear in our day-to-day experience, it's the relationships that those children have with the people who are charged professionally with looking after them that matter. And I was particularly pleased that one of the findings, again, of the inspection was that our social workers know the children very well and genuinely care for them. And I can't think of a much higher tribute, really, in a world where we are talking about professionals who are focused on some very, very difficult issues, to be able to see that they are providing that genuine personal care and attention. The inspectors went on to find that children's physical, emotional and mental health and well-being are given a high priority by staff and senior leaders. And when it comes to the engagement we have with our children and young people, they noted in particular that the processes that are in place, and I quote, ensure that their concerns and views are heard directly by decision makers. Now, this is not by any means, Mr. Mayor, a perfect report. There are, in any council, going to be issues that continue to need to be identified. But a theme that runs through it is that we have a body of staff who care very deeply about the children and young people that they are there to support, and they do it in a way that is also extremely professional. A further theme that runs through it is the impact that leaders in this organisation have on the outcomes for our children and young people. And I mentioned our Chief Executive, our Director of Children's Services, senior management team, right through to those who undertake the day-to-day management of social work staff. And for councillors who've not been to have a look at our children's social work teams, it's worth taking a bit of time at some point to pop down and meet them and see what it's like in that environment where a family in crisis may be physically, in some cases, coming through the door or maybe coming into contact with the council services, and we have that opportunity to intervene in a way that turns that situation around and gets that child back to a situation where they've got a better chance in life. And the impact of leaders on social work practice was an area of the inspection that was graded outstanding, the highest possible grade that Ofsted can allocate. The overall grade of the inspection was good, and I think it's encouraging for us as members to see that given the last inspection outcome in 2013 was that Hillingdon required improvement to be good, that the inspectors have noticed the dramatic improvement that's taken place then and has highlighted in particular the impressive pace of change. I would encourage all members, I said if they haven't had the opportunity to do so, to find the inspection report on the Ofsted website. It does make interesting reading, and I'm sure it will be the topic of further debate and discussion amongst members in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Simmonds. Councillor Chamdal, do you have a supplementary?
Indeed, do I have, Mr. Mayor. Could the Cabinet tell us the terms of reference of this Ofsted visit? Because as most councillors' exposure regards Ofsted is usually a school visit, which is normally performed by 2 or 3 inspectors over a few but full and demanding days.
Councillor Simmonds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The practice of Ofsted has varied a little bit over the years in the way that they undertake an inspection, but Councillor Chamdal is absolutely right to highlight this. The inspection that's taken place involves more than a dozen inspectors who are part of the inspection process for a period of, in total, more than a month. They start off-site, looking at all the data and the information that they can glean about the council, then commenced with an interview, which the Chief Executive and I did with the lead inspector, before the inspection team actually arrived here. And for those whose experience has been, in the past, perhaps only of a school inspection, this process involved, for some of our most junior social work staff, spending substantial parts of their working week sat with people who have been directors of children's services, senior managers in other organisations, scrutinising every action that they take, listening to their telephone calls, reading their files, watching what they're putting onto the computer system, seeing them interacting with children and their families, making notes. And clearly that is a huge burden for people to experience. But one of the big positives is that, again, the inspectors noted the enthusiasm, the commitment of the social workers that they met. They even said, and this is probably a surprise for anyone who's been through an inspection process, that some of them seemed to enjoy talking to Ofsted because it was an opportunity to talk about a job that they loved. And that isn't something which has always been the case, to be a social worker in Hillingdon. And I think, once again, Cllr Chamdal has given an opportunity to highlight the progress that's been made. And as I said, I would strongly encourage him and other members to take the opportunity to meet some of our children's social work staff and to talk to them about what is involved in their day-to-day job.
Thank you very much, Councillor Simmonds. Councillor Goddard, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Does the Cabinet Member with responsibility for community, commerce and regeneration agree with me that our offer to buy Uxbridge Police Station so that it remains operational was well received by local residents? And can he please update us on the response to our letter sent to MOPAC?
Councillor Douglas Mills.
I thank the councillor for his question, his maiden question. I'm sure there will be more before his first term is finished. The short answer would be yes. There was no doubt that ever from the moment that MOPAC came here one evening last autumn and did a consultation process about closing Uxbridge Police Station, it became very clear on that night and soon after that across the borough, many residents did not understand the logic of that decision, but more importantly, did not agree with that decision, and therefore they were welcoming our response to purchase Uxbridge Police Station as soon as MOPAC were willing to sign the contract and to make sure that it maintained its operational status. But I think what's more than that, it was quite clear when all of us were out knocking on doorsteps and doing all that work in that period of purdah leading up to May the 3rd, that this issue was very strong in lots of people's mind. Not only just close to where Uxbridge Police Station is located, but right down the Uxbridge Road, up into the north of the borough, and indeed down in parts of Hayes, many residents raised this concern about what was happening. So they were even more staggered when they found out that Hillingdon Labour Group had voted against our proposal to purchase Uxbridge Police Station, and that helped, I think, reinforce to them the argument about where we stand in support of our residents and where Hillingdon Labour Group stand in support of residents in this borough. So I think it is very easy to say, yes, residents did receive this well, and I think it's fair to say thank you to Councillor Curling for such bad judgment. Also, of course, mirrored by the, who remembers marginal Hillingdon. He only has to look behind him and around him to see the answer to that bad judgment on his behalf as well. But he's got 4 years for him and his group to remember that, especially on council meetings like this. In terms of the response to the letter, surprise, surprise, we got a response yesterday, which is only a holding response. MOPAC are saying we need more time. Now, bearing in mind the offer went in November, and here we are now in July. They need more time to consider the property issues, the financial issues, and operational issues. Well, I think it's quite straightforward, isn't it? The property is well located. It's already got policemen in it at the moment and will continue to do so for at least another 3 years. Financially, there is a cheque willing to be signed to MOPAC for £5 million or whatever the independent valuation finally agrees, ready to sign as soon as they say yes. And bearing in mind that the only reason they're closing these stations is because, as the Mayor says, we've got no money because the wicked government haven't given us any. Well, there's Uncle Ray willing to give them £5 million since November. And have they taken up the offer? No. And operationally, well, as I said, the police station is still going to be run as a police base for 3 years. Doesn't take that much effort to put a front counter back on and to help reassure the public. And it's that symbolism of the police presence in our major town centre, in this borough, reaching out to the north, reaching out to the east, and reaching down to the south. We understand it. Obviously, the Labour group never understood it, and it appears that MOPAC need more time to try and understand it.
Councillor Goddard, do you have a supplementary?
Mr. Mayor, yes, I do, please. Does the Cabinet Minister agree with me that the only plausible reason why we've not had a response to our offer of any substance is because the Mayor of London wants to have his cake and eat it too? He wants the cash from selling Uxbridge Police Station, but he also wants to score a political point by saying that the Conservative government has been responsible for depriving residents of adequate policing, not him.
Councillor Douglas Mills.
Well, I can't possibly comment on what kind of cake the Mayor of London might want to have, but no doubt whatever it is, he's pretty sticky with it because he is in a right mess now. Having made this very public statement that the sole reason to close the police stations across London is because he doesn't have enough money. And yet, I repeat, there is £5 million or the independent valuation of Uxbridge sitting on the table ready for him to use to support direct policing 24/7 available now. Also, operationally, again, as I repeat, it enables us to have a presence to enable our residents to feel that comfort of having a police station and police officers on the street working for them. He can't have it both ways, and I think the honest truth as to why they haven't been able to come back and have the courage to say, we got it wrong, yes, we will take your offer up, is because he has politically painted himself into a corner. However, I'm understanding that we are not alone. There is now a realisation across the whole of the Met that their proposals to close a number of police stations are causing immense problems because, as we said at the time, and as many members of the public said on that evening here during the consultation, where will the police officers go? And the answer from MOPAC was, we need a number of touch points throughout the community. We said to them, and have said directly, we can give you the biggest touch point you can find in Uxbridge, and it's called your police station.
Thank you very much, Councillor Douglas Mills. We now move on to motions, and Lloyd, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As it's the first proper business meeting, I will attempt to guide members through the often complicated process of debating motions. Suffice to say at this point, there's no overall time limit to take the motions. The time motions take to debate is controlled by the speaking rules. Just to remind members that the mover of the motions, and in that case this evening that's Councillors Prince, Allen, Dhillon, Curling and Money, all get 5 minutes to speak. Everybody else gets 3 minutes to speak, and the time you have to speak is controlled by the traffic lights up there. When you have 1 minute left, it will turn to amber, and when your time is up, it'll turn to red, and the Mayor has asked me to remind you again, please don't exceed the time. He doesn't want to be rude in cutting you off in mid-flow, but he will.
Thank you very much, Lloyd. We go on to 7.1, motion from Councillor Prince, and congratulations on your debut.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hope you'll be able to indulge me for just a moment and allow me to quickly thank residents in Barnhill Ward for electing a 25-year-old young woman as one of their representatives, and also to the local Labour Party members, some of which are in the gallery today, that have been endlessly supportive of me, resulting in me standing here. It is not a responsibility I accept lightly. It is a huge honour, but also a huge opportunity. Mr Mayor, I hope that my motion is not considered contentious or to be based on party lines. It is simply about engaging and supporting young people here in Hillingdon. It is an issue that is bigger than any party line that we could draw. I hope that at the age of 25 I'm still considered young. But I look around this chamber and we have to be honest with ourselves. We are not reflective of this borough, especially when it comes to age. We have Councillor Milani and Councillor Radia, who are certainly adding to great representation of young people in this borough, but we still have a way to go. Although representation is important, it means nothing if they don't advocate the issues that affect the group that they represent. I have championed young persons' issues since I became politically active nearly 9 years ago. I was asked by one of my teachers if I would stand as a candidate in our school mock general election as they needed another candidate. I agreed and came second. I apparently couldn't compete with Plague Mania at my school. But it was during that campaign that my arm was twisted by my local Labour councillor in Hertfordshire, Richard Butler, to come out on the doors with him and talk to residents. On general election day in 2010, I joined the Labour Party and the rest is history. But I looked around at my peers and the vast majority of them had no interest in politics or civic and community issues. They were going into London and attending their first club nights, and I was sitting in the council chamber a bit like this as the youngest councillor Elstree and Borehamwood Council had ever had. I suppose to my friends, I was the weird one. And now here I am, all these years later, and I've seen life for young people change. I cannot stress enough that the mental health crisis, particularly in young people, is a ticking time bomb. I've made no secret of my own recent battle with depression, and whilst I'm now off medication and in recovery, I'm very aware it is an ongoing battle for the rest of my life. But young persons' mental health services are inadequate at best. When I first realised that there was something wrong, I tried to sign up to Link Counselling here in Hillingdon, but they had no appointment availability for months to come. A service specifically for 25s and under here in Hillingdon was at capacity and could offer me nothing. I know that mental health is an issue that severely affects older people too, but the instability of being a young person where you're trying to find your place in this world, not having enough money to get through the month, and the pressures of modern life are a mental health recipe for disaster. Young people need more than platitudes about how it will get better, because when you're in that pit of despair, you can't even remember what it felt like to be better. Housing is another area where young people have pulled the short straw. My parents' and grandparents' generation had a realistic chance of saving up a deposit and buying a house. If you're my age, even if you're able to save up a deposit of tens of thousands of pounds, the chances are that you don't earn enough to be given a mortgage. And then we're told to move out of London, but the jobs are here, so we move further out of London and commute for hours daily instead. Paying huge fares for the commute, high rent even outside of London, and no respite because we're either working or commuting. A lifestyle that should not be welcome here in the 21st century. Trust me when I say that being a young person is hard today, and I want the issues facing young people in Hillingdon to have a recognised voice to champion them here in this chamber. We have an older person's champion, and it is only right that the issues facing young people are championed here too. Whether the priorities for the champion are looking at youth centre provision in the borough, mental health services for young people, recreational activities, a platform for young people to speak on, better housing support, getting young people off the street and into secure accommodation, working with young people to tackle antisocial behaviour and crime on our streets, reproductive and sexual health. These young people will grow up to lead this council one day. We need to nurture and provide for them and their concerns now. I hope all councillors will be able to accept and vote for this motion as submitted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Milani.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I would also like to take this opportunity to thank residents from Heathrow Villages for electing to represent them. 1 year younger, Kerry. Were it not for the youth services in my local council, I most likely would not have been here. For me and thousands upon thousands of young people all across the country and specifically within this borough, investment in services, activities and support for young people is all that stands between us and a just and sustainable future. The disappearance of youth clubs, of youth advocacy and specific targeted support for young people is nothing but an embarrassment. I've spent most of my adult life in this borough working with and for young people. From my time at the Union of Brunel Students and now at the National Union of Students, I have seen and felt firsthand the cruelty of snatching a young person's life away from them, the shame of seeing the cyclical nature of poverty, of gangs and of violence. And it's too easy and it's frankly embarrassing for us to load the blame of these issues on young people themselves, when it is in fact the real-time effects of no investment in their lives and their future. Mr. Mayor, I speak of these things not as an abstract, but with lived experience. I have lost too many friends to knife crime, to drugs, to poverty, because this and other local authorities have abdicated their responsibility. And for those not respectful enough to listen to emotions, speech, and who interrupt, yes, in Hillingdon. There are too many leaders and too many cabinets, including ours in this room, who have refused to listen to the experts in the field and invest in the future of lives of young people. As the youngest member of this council, I don't want to keep seeing my friends and my colleagues on the news. This motion and the creation of a youth advocate creates the champion I and so many young people in this borough deserve and need. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Milani. Just a reminder to everybody that you are speaking through me, not directly across the floor to your opponents. Thank you very much. Councillor Dhillon, please.
There's another young person. This is not eating to my 3 minutes, right? This is a motion that I've been pondering for quite a while in some shape or form, just after the recent council elections. I'd like to congratulate Councillor Prince on her maiden speech. It's always a daunting process, but I thought it was sick. I told you I'm young. Mr. Mayor, out canvassing and having the door slammed in my face in South Ruislip was quite disconcerting. However, throughout the borough, I came across younger people, more than me, who would just say they would not vote, they are not interested, and they do not feel that we do anything for them. With so much apathy amongst younger people, it's astonishing that the turnout was as it was. Our youngsters are growing up in a world that's so very difficult with so many challenges. Underfunded schools, peer pressure on how to look and behave, then on to higher education and trying to fund that, possibly working at the same time to support oneself, relationships, which those older members amongst us was probably the biggest problem in their time, to buying a house and trying to look for work in a climate of increasing automisation. I'm not sure if it would be worth being in that position now. Peer pressure when it comes to drug use is such a subject that many push to one side, but exists and has to be sympathetically addressed. As a council, we champion our older residents. We must also champion our youngsters with the same philosophy. They are our future, our councillors, and therefore our policy makers when we are older. Our champion, from the youngest in our schools to those leaving universities. Guiding and encouraging our youngsters is as important as respecting and caring for our elders. It's my pleasure to support this motion.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sweeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a much, much older person, I congratulate our new young Labour councillor for the professional and effective way in which she has presented this important motion tonight, and in the way that she has stretched out her hand to all sides of this chamber and to all councillors within it. It is indeed refreshing that we have someone who is speaking up for the youth of Hillingdon and who, as a young person herself. Before any councillor in this chamber decides to vote for or against this motion, shall we undertake a quick audit on how Hillingdon Council currently serves the youth of our borough? On the placards which are still waving merrily over the high streets of the borough at a cost of some £23,000, do we see anything boasting about how the council supports our young people? Apart, of course, from providing a sufficient number of school places, which is a statutory duty. We do not. The placards talk of roads, pavements and parks, the elderly and the high streets, but nothing, absolutely nothing, about the services to the youth of our borough. You may ask why, but the simple answer is because the youth services budget in Hillingdon has been cut and cut and cut by up to 80% in recent years. so much so that activities in our youth centres are down to a mere trickle, just a few hours a week for some. I'm sure that those watching on YouTube tonight will be unaware of the magnitude of the cuts to youth services. One effect of this has been that there is now little mentoring of our youth being undertaken and limited overall strategies put in place to guide young lives well to a new way and a better path. The youth of Hillingdon needs a voice. They need to know that our council cares for them and are indeed putting young residents first. The establishment of a youth champion will go a little way in achieving a much better deal for our young people. I support this motion wholeheartedly, with no amendments.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sweeting. It's now Councillor Simmonds, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the amendment that's set out in the order paper and explain why. We've had a bit of an arms race of who's the youngest and what the circumstances were. I mean, I became a councillor in this borough at the age of 22. Old, yes, as Councillor Mills is just telling me. Now the father of a 2.5-year-old and a 10-day-old. I've got to say, I don't entirely recognise the picture that's been painted. And generalisations and platitudes about concerns that people perhaps legitimately have are no substitute for concrete action and specific proposals. And we heard earlier on about what the council has been doing in respect of our social care services, specific targeted action for the most vulnerable young people. And one of the reasons that this amendment is coming forward is to highlight the fact that platitudes are one thing, but we need to decide what we're going to spend, how we're going to spend it, in order to address the concerns that are being outlined. And whilst I think we all acknowledge that we face challenges, and in particular recruiting staff to run sessions in some of our youth centres has been a challenge, there is certainly no question that this administration has put forward the resources that are required to make that happen in Hillingdon. And just looking at the context of how things have changed in this borough, it is, has been for a long time and remains a good place to grow up, a good place to go to school, and a good place to get help should you need it, as well as a very, very good range of education. We're also home to London's top performing college for those youngsters for whom school isn't working out. As an administration, we provide bursaries this year in honour of the armistice to help our young people go to university. Our members of the Youth Parliament are hugely active in inputting to the work both of the Youth Service and the Council's wider job. The Duke of Edinburgh Award, our sports clubs, our societies, the number of those in the borough has been mushrooming in response to the baby boom. Our youth centres, including the new ones that this administration has built, funded and opened across the borough, providing a range of activities. Fiesta, the music school, Fiesta worth mentioning, one of the busiest, most active programmes for young people across London. And of course, all of this, Councillor Prince, I'm afraid, was voted against by your colleagues around you. So whilst I am pleased that we're having the opportunity to discuss these issues in this chamber, Councillor Prince, I'm afraid it's not this administration you need to convince, it's the colleagues sat next to you.
Do I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Puddifoot.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could I also congratulate Councillor Prince on her maiden speech? She is obviously sincere about this and does speak from the heart. But just on a technical point, it is not champions that make policy. Champions champion policy. It is the administration that make policy. So appointing a champion for any purpose will do nothing at all in itself. So you need to have a word with your colleagues to see how the council actually works. But I'll say no more.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, can I just clarify, because one or two confused faces around, so that we now have an amendment moved and seconded. It's the amendment set out at the bottom of page 3 and mostly on page 4. I had 3 further speakers who wish to speak on the original motion. We now move into debating the amendment. So Councillor Mathers, Councillor Allen, Councillor Nelson, if you wish to speak now on the amendment, you will need to indicate again to speak because you wanted to vote on the original motion. And to make it absolutely clear, the Mayor will take the speakers in the order that they indicate. Councillor Simmonds indicated to speak before all 3 of you, so he gets to move the amendment when he speaks and doesn't have to wait for everybody else to speak. So if you wish to speak now on the amendment, which we are now moving into debating, you will need to indicate again, as Councillor Nelson has done, Councillor Sweeting.
Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Labour Group amendment that the administration over there is talking about regarding our submission. In our amendment, we did not include withdrawing support for our young people or any of our residents in this borough. In fact, the Labour amendment proposed more support for residents and older people, which you, the Conservatives, voted against. So I'm speaking to the Mayor. I'm not speaking to any one of you. I'm speaking to the Mayor. I'm looking at the Mayor. I'm not looking at you. So let's just make it quite clear that we supported for more funding for our residents and our younger people. We did not vote against it. We supported it, but you were the one who voted against it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson.
Councillor Sweeting.
Councillor Sweeting, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I speak against the amendment. It is with some sadness that I see that the amendment seeks to belittle the good intent of the motion, which has been presented by a young councillor wishing to create a youth champion at a time when the lives of our young people are being beset with problems and challenges. That the amendment resorts to some pettiness of past budget battles between our two parties before the local elections, rather than, Mr. Mayor, concentrating on the essence of the motion, is so unworthy of those who think it is amusing to score such points. For you must remember, I think, that the ruling party of this council also voted against the Labour Group budget amendments, which would have brought much-needed targeted money to our most vulnerable young children in children's centres and in areas where over 40% of children are living in poverty. So let's get to the chase with what has been proposed. It is for a youth champion to be created now, and this would not be left to the whim of any one councillor, albeit the leader of the council. It is appropriate for such a champion to be created now, and not wait until the penny drops that this is actually a very good idea, albeit from your political opponents who want to see youth services enhanced after a long, very long period of cuts. One last broadside. Our young people are this country's future and need to be listened to and cherished. They are our residents too, some of whom are currently being allowed to drift into unfortunate circumstances and for all the want of a little support. Remember, we now have had the 5th stabbing in our borough. So come on, Hillingdon, support this borough's youth by listening to them and acting on what they are dying literally to tell you through a youth champion. I oppose the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Sweeting. Councillor Mathers, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I speak against the amendment. I believe this amendment waters down a decisive action that others are looking for in order to support young people. It's not uncommon for youth champions to be in councils up and down the country, despite the political parties that run those councils. And it is disappointing that this amendment makes this party political. This is about serving the needs of younger residents in Hillingdon. Young people and children need those who are decision makers on their education, safeguarding, public facilities and services to truly understand and promote their well-being, to assist them to thrive, to help remove any barriers that prevent them from being fully equipped to be healthy and successful adults. A youth champion in the original motion would provide that, and this amendment unfortunately waters that down. I vote against the amendment, or call people to vote against the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Mathers. Councillor Allen, please.
Mr. Mayor, I speak as a recycled teenager. Before I became a councillor, I set up an elderly drop-in on my estate. And the one thing those elderly people said is they didn't want to be stuck in the house, but they wanted to be part of the community the same as the youngsters. When we were choosing a name for ourselves, we became the recycled teenagers, and here I still am. Councillor Prince brought her emotion tonight because she, like many fair-minded people, saw the imbalance of what was going on around us. The extras laid on for one group while services to the other are cut to the bone. In the youth service, it's glaringly obvious. Many elderly residents tell me time and again that while they appreciate the little extras thrown at them and they fully understand why they're being thrown at them, they would like to see the money spent on young people. They would like the young people to be kept off the streets, away from harm, and to foster better links with them. They do not want the them and us scenario that you are creating. This administration that rails against the doctrine of the nanny state, but tonight has shone a light on what they really think of youngsters, to be seen and yet not to be heard, unless, of course, the father of the house, Cllr Ray Puddifoot, the leader of this administration, deems it fit for them to do so. Not a stance any forward-thinking leader of the council should be extolling. This administration may have dropped the committee that children valued, but we are all still corporate parents. Tuck them away, they...
Councillor Ryan, thank you. I'm looking after this.
Thank you. Thank you, and I apologise, but, you know, she keeps speaking to me, so I speak back.
Please continue.
This administration may have dropped a valued committee. All of us are still corporate parents, still charged with making sure that young people get a fair deal and their voices are heard throughout the council, such as Cllr Prince and the other councillors. We owe it to the youth of this borough to be forward-thinking. Be really proud to live in Hillingdon. I keep hearing that word, but you can only be proud if you're treated as part of Hillingdon. Let's vote for the motion and vote against the amendment. To do otherwise is doing a disservice to the youngsters of this borough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen.
Tonight, so
Councillor Dhillon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's not to declare my age. It's just a point of information, really. Our budgetary amendment last year was a budgetary amendment that included pretty much everything that the administration had in their budget, and just a few tweaks that didn't affect younger people. So there's full budgetary support for all youth provision. I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Councillor Dhillon. Councillor Hensley, please.
Mr. Mayor, I give me a great pleasure to support this amendment, and I believe it also gives equal status to an older person's champion as it does a younger person's champion. But unfortunately, with age, you tend to look back and see where you've come. I believe young people in Hillingdon have a far better chance now than they did when I first joined this council. Every child has an opportunity to go to a school place that is well equipped, properly funded, with an opportunity in life. When I was at school, the chance of doing an A-level out of the question. The opportunity to go to university, forget it. Young people in this borough now have that opportunity. It's nice to see that we've got 2 universities in this borough that support our young people. Also, young people have the opportunity in this borough to seek employment in an area which is rich and diversity in employment opportunities. It's so easy to talk down, but you've got to forget where we've come. I believe young people are recognised in this borough, they are respected, and the opportunities are there. And my old school motto was, you seek and you will find. I also remember some years back when we got involved in looking at after-school activities and sports opportunities. And we had a matrix set up with opportunities and their venues, and every school young person was given that information so they could fully appreciate what is available in our borough. And as I'm talking now, there are 2 young people that are in Australia funded to the council to give them the opportunity. That would never have happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So let's not talk down
what this council has done for our young people.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hemsley. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Eggington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I fear that the amendment to this motion will effectively negate what it is proposing. If the leader had wanted to appoint a champion for youth, he has had the power to do so for the last 18 years, but he's done nothing to appoint a champion for youth. If he and his party cared about the youngsters in this borough, they would not have closed 2 children's centres. If they cared about the children in this borough, they would not have reduced the offer in the remaining children's centres. If they had concern about youngsters in this borough, they would have not broken their promise made in 2014 to build 3 new young people's centres. If they cared about youngsters in this borough, they would not have reduced the universal offer of the remaining young people's centres. In fact, in all of the young people's centres, there's just 27 hours a week of offer for all the children in this borough. And finally, if they cared about the youngsters in this borough, they would not have abolished the Corporate Parenting Board. It's as though the children are just a cost centre for this council, instead of their real importance as our future. But there is a link between the various motions tonight. By reducing children's services, children's centres, young people's centres, the result is more antisocial behaviour, and more pressure on the reduced numbers of antisocial behaviour officers, and more pressure on the police. So I ask you to vote against this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Eggington. Are there any other speakers? Nope.
Mr. Mayor, that being the case, just a couple of points. Just for clarification, Councillor Eggington used the words that this would negate the motion. An amendment to a motion can leave out words, insert other words, but as long as the effect is not to negate the motion, and having looked at the amendment on this, I don't believe this does negate the motion. It does amend it, clearly, that's the point of it, but I don't believe it negates the motion. Given that there are no other speakers, the right of reply, as I explained earlier, now takes effect. On an amendment, the right of reply falls to the mover of the amendment, but it also falls to the mover of the original motion, in this case, Councillor Prince. You get to speak first before Councillor Simmonds as a right of reply. I know, a bit of a shock, but please.
I will reserve my right. Is that what you said?
If you reserve your right, unfortunately, that means you won't be able to speak again.
At all?
On this one, no. The right to reply refers to the people who move the motion or move the amendment, and when we have an amendment, the mover of the amendment gets to speak very last, but the mover of the original motion gets to speak before them. If you skip that, then you won't be able to speak again on this item.
Okay. Procedure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I submitted the motion, it was done with the best of intentions, an issue that I thought the council could put party lines aside for, and realise that it was an important issue that we could work together on. You could even say it was an issue we could have worked cooperatively on. I know the leader struggles with the word cooperative and its meaning. I find it deeply unfortunate that the Conservatives have used such an issue as a political football, because whilst the councillors on the other side of this chamber will chortle to themselves and pat each other on the back for a job well done, they've proven they don't actually really care about young people at all. I have spent the best part of 9 years fighting Conservatives, and as far as I'm concerned, the battle is just beginning. So whilst I'm doing my best to raise the issues of the most vulnerable and underrepresented in this chamber, I will also be out on those streets talking to people. Whether it's to elect a Member of Parliament for Uxbridge and South Ruislip that is actually present, or to re-elect our Greater London Assembly member Onka Sahota in 2 years' time. I will be telling residents all about how their Conservatives here in Hillingdon let down their children and grandchildren, from scrapping the Corporate Parenting Board and reducing oversight of some of the most vulnerable residents in this borough, to cuts to youth services. Mr. Mayor, through you, I'd like to talk to the young people in this borough, because with their amendment, reducing the motion to just words, what they are saying is, don't be young, Don't be in care or suffer from family breakdown. Don't be young and unwell. Don't be young and develop a mental illness. Don't be young and LGBT. Don't be young and homeless. Don't be young and expect to be paid the same as someone a few years older. Don't be young and want your voice heard. Don't be young and want recreational activities. Don't be young and consider yourself to be a valued resident of this borough, because this Conservative administration will ensure that you are not. But maybe, just maybe, if they get through all that and somehow make it to 65, they'll get free swimming and a tea party thrown for them. They may have no pension, they may be in serious need for social care or support, but at least they'll have a free allotment plot. Young people deserve better than this Conservative council, and this Labour group will keep fighting for them.
Thank you, Councillor Prince. Councillor Simmonds, please.
Well, Mr. Mayor, we've heard some very passionately and eloquently expressed contributions from members of the Labour group in the debate tonight, but the fact that they are passionate and eloquent does not make them true or right. I think we need, as a council, in this debate, to call out this attempt to convince the young people of Hillingdon that their lives are terrible and awful, and that this is a place where they have no opportunities. When we came to the council meeting in February to set the budget, the opportunity to focus the resources of this council and our council tax on the things that we regarded as important. This administration set out an ambitious programme, cradle to grave, what we do for our youngest residents through to the most elderly of our residents. And the party opposite voted against it. Let's not forget that. There was no sense of even sitting on your hands. Councillor Prince, your colleagues who were there at that council meeting voted against everything that we resource for the young people of this borough. And that political choice that they made spells out very eloquently, very passionately, that this was not a Labour group thinking, what can we do practically to help the young people of Hillingdon? What can we do practically for our residents? It was a Labour group that was obsessed with trying to send political messages. And the voters called you out on that in the election. They made a very decisive and clear choice for an administration that would back them. Absolutely. And to hear Labour members referring to it as pettiness, to point out that they voted against resourcing these services for our young people. To hear that described as pettiness, well, hundreds of millions of pounds, the focusing of resources, the things that are outlined in the Ofsted report that we discussed earlier on, where we provide good services to support our most vulnerable young people. That is a very eloquent and passionate, I hope, expression of what this administration is about when it comes to putting residents first rather than spouting political propaganda.
Okay, everyone. Now we're going to the vote on the amendment. All those in favour, please show your hands. And against? Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, that amendment is carried and becomes the substantive motion which is set out in the italics on page 4, to which further amendments can be moved. The Mayor will ask if there are any further amendments. If not, he will put that to the vote.
Are there any further amendments? Can't see any hands.
In favour of this?
Right. All those in favour of this, please show your hands. And against, please.
Mr. Mayor, that substantive motion is carried.
Thank you.
Councillor Allen.
7.2, motion from Cllr Allen, please. Cllr Allen, can you put your mic on, please? I'm a bit deaf up here.
Before I start my speech tonight, I'd like to present Councillor Bianca with a little poster. We can't afford to pay £23,000 for it, of course, and it's made by children, but they enjoyed making it because that's where they have to live. Could someone hand it over to him so we can have a good look at it? You know what I'm talking about. But I have heard on the grapevine that some of the cabinet members were out on my estate because we got a bit of a clean-up on Wednesday. A warm summer's night, and you want to invite your family and friends over. But sadly, as usual, there are a few things that stop you. That is the antisocial behaviour, kicking off in a street close by, and the state of the street. Windy City is how some describe it, complete with Wild West shows and the tumble-down weeds that follow. How authentic. The weeds we are talking about are the weeds the council should be dealing with, not the weed that the police or non-existent police have to deal with. The council weeds are everywhere you look, be it not so in the not so humorously called flower beds, shrubs, troughs, the intersections, the footpaths, the walkways, and not forgetting the giant dome that local residents call the Sputnik, which, by the way, you got shaved on Wednesday. It's finally got its antennae cut. Grass cutting takes place, so much of it is left, and residents have to keep complaining. That's in the south, of course, not in the north of the borough. We get the trimmings left behind as a mulch for the weeds. In the north of the borough, they get their grass mulch taken away. And let's not forget, Townford has a state-of-the-art weed patches, or weed beds, around every tree. Strange we have not seen the green flag bearer taking credit for them, but who would take credit for them? One of the local residents, who knows the leader of the council, got so upset with us that we couldn't get the weeds removed and the rubbish removed and everything else he wanted done, that he told me quite clearly, I am going to contact Ray Puddifoot because he'll get it done if you can't. Well, the emails from him have become a bit silent, but when we do get them now, he never mentions his dear friend Ray, because the weeds are still there, the tumble down's still there, and we might have had a shave-in on Wednesday, but I can bet you, unless something's done, we'll be waiting until next year for the next spot to be done. But now, enough is enough. We, as the residents of Townfield, demand the same cleaning programme, the same road maintenance, the same cleaning, the same weed removal that the north of the borough got. Go along the Uxbridge Road. Go along the Uxbridge Road.
Can I hold you there for a minute, please, Councillor Allen? Gentlemen, can we have silence in here, please, whilst we have a person speaking?
Thank you.
Thank you. Continue, please, Councillor Allen.
Go along the Uxbridge Road tonight, if anybody cares to, and look at the beautiful laid footpaths that we're told that, you know, this council's giving the residents. The beautiful big bowls. They've got trees in them that were young saplings once. Now, I don't know if this administration thinks that someone up high is going to water them, but that hasn't happened. So now, what's joined the saplings that are half dead? More weeds. Is that really what this administration thinks of Hayes residents? I ask them to get their act together and give us the same service as the North. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Allen. Can you switch your mic off, please? Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Dhillon.
It's my night tonight. Mr. Mayor, I'm sure a lot's going to be said and talked about this motion. Hillingdon in bloom does certainly look amazing with all the flower baskets along the roads in our borough. It's very pretty. However, as you walk with your head down a little bit, it's not so great. And I'm positive the Green Spaces team do their best. And the changing weather conditions, who knows what the weather's going to do, and it dictates what the weeds are going to do, and then dictates what we're going to do. I think if you had better communication on towards and etc. and how we can best handle it, would maybe placate councillors and and residents. However, I do have one little whinge. I drive past Park Road Common regularly, and the common looks absolutely amazing. Beautiful, lovely, cut, clean. But the attention to detail there doesn't quite translate to Hillingdon House Farm or Bourne playing fields, where Ickenham Youth or Sandgate football teams play, for instance. It's a completely different story. I'm quite proud of Hillingdon, and I love living here, and I'm a councillor here. But when you have parents and we turn up to the fields at Bourne House or at Sandgate, and we have to, as a group of parents, rake up all the grass, and you see all the residents from other boroughs coming to watch their boys play football. It doesn't paint the greatest picture, so I don't know how we can sort that out, and it's probably more of an ME than a part of the motion, but it's certainly embarrassing to myself, and as is sometimes the state of the leisure centre, for instance. There are bird droppings all over, and every time I go there, I have to point it out to them. So it's not all a rosy picture, but it does. It's, as I say, it's a little whinge, and it's certainly not the Hillingdon in blue that Councillor Bianca would like to see. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dhillon. Councillor Nelson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to echo some of exactly what my other councillors echo in regards to the sporadic way of how things is done within the borough. Sometimes when the grass is cut, partially cut, it's cut pathway, you go down the other way, the grass is still there. The grass is left on the road, it's not on the pavement, it's not blown away. And it's quite sometimes embarrassing when you go into the park and the parents are there with the young ones, and you hear them responding to say, well, this grass is cut. At least surely they can gather the grass up and not leave it like that for us to come and get our feet involved in it. In regards to the planting and the hanging baskets as well, you come to this side of the borough, it's nice and pretty. Yes, some on the post is very nice and pretty as well. But when you look around, you can see the demise of some of it because it's not very nice. So, you know, I echo and support what my other councillors are saying in regards to how the south of the borough is being treated. Let's treat everybody equally and not just treat one part of the borough one way and the other part of the borough the other way. And please bear in mind too as well that our residents do see and they do know what's going on. So don't think that it's being done equally. It's not being done equally across this borough. Let's treat everyone the same way as you would like to be treated yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Bianco, please.
Mr. Mayor, as a councillor of some years standing, I've been asked on a number of occasions to mentor some of my less experienced colleagues. However, it's not very often that I get the chance to mentor a more senior colleague, councillor, let alone one from across the other side of the political spectrum. Mr. Mayor and Councillor Allen, this motion raises a number of service issues which could have far more easily been resolved by a member's inquiry or two, rather than bringing a motion to the council where individual issues can't be dealt with. However, Councillor Allen, listen and try and learn. Mr. Mayor, the issue of weeds is an annual problem for local authorities across the UK, exacerbated in recent years by the ever-increasing regulation on the types of weed killer we're allowed to use. Gone are the days when a swift dose of DDT would kill everything in sight, more's the pity. Today, we are quite rightly concerned about the possibilities of chemicals used getting into our water supply, quite rightly, and as a result, the sprays we use are less toxic. In Hillingdon, we work hard to keep weeds under control with 3 annual rounds of spraying, where every footpath and every street across the borough is sprayed during the growing season. And this treatment does work, albeit not as fast as we would like. Street cleaning is also an essential service for us, and I am pleased to say that we employ a larger street cleaning team than ever before. And Councillor Allen is right. We don't treat the south in the same way as the north. In the south, we have 53 operators, and in the north, only 33. We also deploy more machinery to keep our open spaces and streets clear. Between February and June this year, Mr. Mayor, 3,527 instances of fly tipping were dealt with in the borough, 82% of which were in the south and only 18% in the north. And I'm delighted to tell you, that with the introduction of the Special Collection Service, fly tipping has reduced by 15% across the borough. And in the same period, some 9,258 requests for that service have been made and dealt with. However, it is worth noting that resident satisfaction surveys are a key indicator for this administration, as putting our residents first remains our raison d'etre. In the last survey, residents gave 76% satisfaction for their parks and open spaces, with a similar rating for street cleansing. And if that isn't adequate endorsement, then 48 green flags and an RHS gold medal should be. And guess what? More green flags in the south than in the north. And indeed, in our most recent borough-wide survey in May of this year, residents confirmed overwhelming support for the actions of this administration and gave us a further 4-year mandate to continue to provide for their needs.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry to just try and finish up. We don't need an investigation. Our residents are already proud to live in Hillingdon. I'm sure that over the next 4 years, even more of them will agree. We will be voting against.
Order. Thank you. Cllr Money, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't going to speak on this motion today, but come to my ward in Heathrow Villages. We have a monthly meeting. Happy to invite you, Cllr Puddifoot, or Cllr Bianca rather. We have the same complaints coming all the time, and it's the same complaints in the same places. We don't have proper street cleaning, the lack of flower beds. Many times the leader gets copied into our emails by some residents, so I'm sure he's aware of the problems. Residents feel that the council just don't care about my ward of Heathrow Villages, and specifically Harmonsworth Village, because of the threat from the third runway. So I request that I'm sending out an open invitation to come and meet us in the village. Thank you. 3, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Cllr Money. Cllr Cawthorne, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This motion raises matters which certainly go to the very heart of our living environment. They matter very much to our residents, without a doubt. And so there's an argument about that on this side of the chamber. Councillor Bianco has already talked about the detail around what the motion is seeking here tonight, and how it portrays, I think, a lack of understanding of the council's approach to this service area, which one might reasonably have expected a member of the experience of Cllr Allen to ascertain through the normal members' inquiry process. But, Mr. Mayor, my point is really a broader one, which goes to the root of how we function constitutionally in terms of member input on decision making. On the 27th of June, just a week ago, the RASPOC considered a report which covered, among other things, agreed changes to how streamlined policy and overview committees will operate with consolidated terms of reference. Listed within the RASPOC's remit are highways, street environment, as well as environmental health and air quality. Within the terms of reference is included, and I quote, to conduct reviews of policy, services or aspects of service which were chosen by the committee. Mr. Mayor, my point is there have been no directly related reviews conducted by the RASPOC around the areas covered in this motion in the recent past. And from what I can see, no evidence that members have indeed sought to do so. Now, Mr. Mayor, there's nothing wrong with that, and I don't think it's our role here to second-guess the decision-making of our colleagues on RASPOC. Judging by the content of this motion, I suspect they have a better grasp of the issues being raised here than Councillor Allen. I would add that the RASPOC receive information from time to time which helps inform their thinking about which areas to focus on. But it is, of course, as always, open to them to review these service areas if they are so minded. Mr. Mayor, I repeat something I've said on several occasions in this chamber before. We really need to use the mechanisms and processes available to us under the Constitution to explore these issues in far greater depth than we ever can in the heady atmosphere of this council chamber. In the absence of this basic groundwork, motions like this one amount to nothing more really than to gesture politics. I'm going to make a final point, Mr Mayor. The Council does indeed take the care of our borough very seriously. Our Green Spaces team, our street cleansing teams and our specialist contractors do a first-class job, and they're continually striving to maintain and improve the environment for our residents. We oppose the motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cawthorne. Councillor Curling.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a few points on the debate, really. I support the motion in the name of my fellow ward councillor. And the reason it's here, well, yes, between the ward councillors we've raised lots and lots of MEs regarding this situation. However, it doesn't stop us facing residents at residents' meetings, complaining constantly that the pretty flower beds that once adorned their estates are now overgrown, uncared for, and attract fly tipping and antisocial behaviour. They attract beer cans and a whole range of things. Countless numbers of MEs have gone in, and the fact that this motion has had to be brought to this chamber because the MEs don't address the problem issues exactly why Cllr Allen brought this motion to this council. So I would ask, I hear what the administration is saying, but I would ask that they go back and actually look at this. And I would welcome an officer to be allowed to come and visit some of our estates. But if the leader or any cabinet member wishes to come and see what we're talking about and see the MEs that we put in, I am sure they would agree with this motion, but probably not in this chamber. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Curling. Do we have any other speakers? No? Okay. Cllr Allen then, please.
Okay. Mr Mayor, I knew I'd struck a nerve. To get all those cabinet members getting up and rubbishing what I was saying, how appropriate. To mention Reespock, I sat on Reespock. I asked for the issue to be put on there, as some members here will know. And we were told, no, we'll come to that another time. Reespock is not doing what it should do. When Reespock was created, it was created that members on that committee and others could put things forward. What's happening and what has continued to happen on Reespock and other committees is you ask for something to be put on, and if this administration thinks it's going to be lovely and flowery and see them in a good light, it goes on. If not, in the back drawer. I go along to the executive scrutiny where the chairman there didn't want to shut down any debate on anything, and he told members there, and I can quote him, take it to the Reespock. Discuss that. That's the place for these discussions to go on. It doesn't happen. And I need no lessons from Councillor Bianco, Councillor Cawthorne, who still hasn't responded to an email for 3 months, except in on holding. I need no what's name. Look at my record on MEs. Look at what MEs are talking about. Rubbish on the streets, dirty streets, weeds, you name it. My other ward work, my housing cases, my benefit cases, my domestic violence cases that I take on, they don't see it, the ME. They go elsewhere because they go to officers that I know are going to deal with them. Now, I'm going to be told, oh, that's not the proper procedure. But anybody who knows this council knows that there are officers who will give you the answers you need to go and get on with the job, and there's others who will send you emails saying, Councillor, the rubbish you've reported or the cupboard you reported on such a road on Wednesday has been cleared. So you go out in the road and you look and you think, Yes, it has been cleared. It's been moved further up the road. And the van has had to pass it, but that rubbish is still sitting there. So please do not insult any of our intelligence in the south of the borough. The process is not working. It's not fit for purpose. And weed free, well, the north of the borough is weed free, I think. That would be a question of judgment. When we asked for mobile CCTV, I said, can we have it? And they said,
time up
there's,
now,
yeah, there's a long
Allen.
list. Well,
No,
allow me the same...
I stopped Councillor Bianco. I'm stopping you.
Stop him straight away.
Councillor Allen, please.
35
No,
CCTV.
Councillor Allen, please. Okay, we go to the vote. Can we have a show of hands? Those for the motion, please. And against? Motion lost. We go now to motion 7.3. Councillor Dhillon, please.
Thank you. Even I'm getting sick of my voice now. Mr Mayor, over the last 18... This is mostly a ward one, but I think it'll affect everybody in the end. Mr Mayor, over the last 18 months, both Pinkwell and Botwell wards have seen an increase in what we can only describe as street racers. Street racers who drive at dangerous speeds, mostly throughout the late hours of the night, any day of the week, whatever the race conditions could be. Councillor Gardner and I have been reporting these issues to the council and to the police, yet for us very little has been done in that time. We've called for extra police, we've called the ASB team out, we've called the out-of-hours team to come out, and it's unfortunate, but very little has been done, communicated to us as ward councillors, and very little in the eyes of the general public. Diaries of when races are out have been passed over to officers here, registrations given to the police, descriptions of cars. It was really only until I took that video at the Asda car meet that we get a reaction. In some ways I was grateful for that event. It's quite frightening, but I was grateful for it. There were children in cars, mothers, fathers, all sorts. The store had just closed, and there were 100 cars in there. But it was only because of that I could actually highlight what was actually happening. In context, one has to appreciate that event was larger than normal. But the noise generated was pretty much the same because there's just one car whizzing around, very loud, and another one with his showing off that he had a big exhaust. Big deal. Taking aside the noise element, many of these racers, they actually drive to the locations at similar speeds and drive on our public highway like that. They may be experienced and have some skill, but we only know too well that other drivers on the road do not have those skills and do not know how to deal with those people. Pedestrians may be crossing a road. I've personally, crossing Asda in the daylight, I've nearly been knocked over. And the driver of that vehicle knows, well, got my reaction anyway. So it doesn't bear thinking about, but we must all and have to all address this situation throughout our borough, because it's going to happen everywhere, and it has happened in the past, and it's going to keep on increasing. The officers in Hillingdon are currently consulting on a PSPO. Its timing to the cynics like me may raise questions, but at least it's the start of something. But however, I'm not completely satisfied. For a long, long time, I was asking for a multi-agency approach, just for officers, the police, councillors, landowners, store managers to get together, and I was requesting it through MEs and in the end through Twitter, just because I was so angry, and to the police. And it's a real reason for this motion. All I'm asking is for residents want this problem to go away. And having volunteered in the end to try and organise it, because nobody else was coming, I've resolved part of it with Asda already, but I don't see how our reaction for the last 18 months has actually put any of our residents first. I can actually talk for 30 minutes or more about all of this, and I could be scathing the police, our officers, our reaction, but what difference is it going to make? I've heard the leader talk on the radio about the resources and the agencies, and they have none. We're all on the brink, and that's certainly true. They're not able to cope. The police cannot cope. I dialed 999 that day, and they told me not to call back unless it was a life or death situation. I dialed 101 that night. 20 minutes, give up. So I thought to myself, I'm going to go over there. I'll have an argument with some of the people. Well, I couldn't because there was too many of them in the end. But this not only happens on a Saturday night, it happens Monday to Thursday. And we don't even have officers on out-of-hours duties, let alone SMT. I knew I was going to run out of time. But had all these agencies taken 20 minutes, just 20 minutes is all it took me, 20 minutes to sit and have a chat, we would not be wasting our time in this motion tonight. If all of them had took 20 minutes to sit and chat, we would not be embarrassed by their lack of response. I truly am embarrassed by the police and our officers' response to this. If we took just 20 minutes to sit down and have a chat, we could have put our residents of Pinkwell, Botwell and this borough first. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Dhillon. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Morse.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a Pinkwell councillor, I've been alarmed that a meet, and the meet is a word that these guys meet with these cars in Asda, car park at Millington Road by Hughes, who put four-wheelers to their heart's content. There's security there, and no police, there was no reaction, no attempt to stop this activity. And I think this is one of the reasons we're concerned. We understand that there's low levels of police. However, we do expect some sort of intervention when there's clearly something seriously going wrong. There's a petrol station there, and there was especially no response to this. So what measures has the council taken? Because I would take the view that we should be proactive. I mean, Councillor Dhillon is very frustrated by this because he's putting a lot of effort to try and get some communications going on to actually stop this activity. The consequence is we've now reached a point where the kids have got they've got confidence, and they've even created a team called the West Side Gang. And what happens then, once you get street credibility, others copy. And I think this is one of the issues. We take the view, a lot of these problems land on us because we're ward councillors. We run a cabinet system, but the first point of contact, the first issues, the first people who have to actually deal with some of these issues is us. And when we reach a point where we cannot get any response from the council, you understand our frustrations. And this will be a part of an issue that comes out in terms of the number of councillors we have, because we actually take the view with these enhanced communication systems, we are actually getting more issues to deal with. The amount of issues we are actually dealing with is rising because the connectivity between us and our residents has actually got better. So in over-inclusion is, I strongly support the motion that's been put forward here, because what we're asking for is the Cabinet actually gives this some thought and applies its ability to solve some of these problems. And this is really a plea from us as ward councillors. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Morse. Councillor Allen, please.
Always stay up. A much loved young child lost his life, and an elderly lady was critically injured through a vehicle speeding down Central Avenue in the early 90s. Life lost in a heartbeat. Over 500 residents signed a petition for traffic calming, hoping for a few speed bumps and some proper speed signs. What they got is a piazza and lots of flower beds. Within days of the completion, the boy racers moved in. The road became like a scale electric track, complete with switchbacks, the fancy roundabouts. But then we had the SNT team, we had support officers, we had estate managers. I lost count. I was sitting there the other night thinking, who else was there? There was everyone there. But they've all gone. We were left with a skeleton. Fast track, a few years later, the same road is again a problem. Speeding at night, and residents saying, again, it sounds like a scale electric track. But they can't call 999 because they recognise that's for emergency calls only. They don't often call 101 anymore because hanging on the line, after being woken up, and then hanging on the line and sitting there being told to hang on while the boy racers are going up and down, and only getting put through when the boy racers have gone home to their beds is not acceptable. Fast forward to the today before the government planned austerity and in our local car park, the supermarket, Sainsbury's, they had boy racers in souped up cars. Cars going round and round, making a noise, revved up engines and whoops of joy coming from the spectators. But then, out of the night came real police sirens, real wailing, and calm descended on that estate, and peace was restored. That was Townfield Ward. Fast forward onto a Saturday night a few weeks ago. Light, camera, and lots of action, but sadly no police, no antisocial behaviour team, nobody available to attend. Excuses given from the council or the police. Looks good, but made residents scared and angry in equal measure. This council and the police, no matter how depleted they are, should deliver a service that the residents need to make them feel safe, to make them feel comfortable.
Thank you very much, Councillor Allen. Thank you. Councillor Douglas Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wish to move the amendment as per the order paper. We are understanding very much about what this issue is and the concerns that it raises, but I'd also want to just provide some clarity in terms of roles and responsibilities and the involvement, especially when these things take place on land which is not in public ownership. So antisocial behaviour is the responsibility of the council, but there are a number of issues where antisocial behaviour does quite clearly move towards more criminal activity. And I think the examples that we've been hearing about and are aware of fall into that category, and therefore we do need the support of the police to be able to respond. The purpose of this amendment is to make sure that with our new borough-wide tri-borough arrangement of policing, that the new commander who looks after this area does actually understand the concerns that have been expressed and the need for his police to recognise a response is going to be required in such circumstances. We also need to make sure that he is getting very clear command from the centre that where these things happen, they are not allowed to say, oh, well, it's a local council matter and it's got to be dealt with there. That there is a clear recognition that we are talking about areas of criminality which require the force of law. Now, as to where these things take place, clearly, if it takes place in a public area or on one of our highways, it is a lot easier for us to be able to respond and to react. If, however, as has been the case in this particular one example, where some of the worst experiences have been within the car park of a supermarket, then there has to be discussion. Now, the encouraging news, and I hope that the move of this motion will take this as encouraging news, I've heard today that there has been an admission by the landowner of that particular site that they have been slow to respond and that they need to be doing something. And you're not alone. This isn't just about that part of our borough. I recall when a supermarket was first opened in the Ruislip area many, many years ago, that didn't begin with A, but began with a letter much further down the alphabet. They too did not do anything about their car park, and it was a magnet for the youngsters of the day to come in with their cars and to practice things, and quite rightly, the residents complained. Discussions then, that particular supermarket reacted very quickly and working with us as a local council to put barriers in place and to resolve the problem. What our amendment does is allow us to take it to the next level, and therefore I am moving it as a friendly amendment to be able to have the discussion with the right people to get the solutions that the residents deserve.
Can I have a seconder? Councillor Palmer.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I second the amendment and reserve my right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to clarify, we're now debating the amendment as set out in the italics in the middle of page 5. There were no other speakers on the original motion anyway, so now anybody who indicates will speak on the amendment.
Do I have anyone? Councillor Mills.
Yet again, this is the same pattern. We have a problem. We don't want to deal with it as a council. We then say, right, where can we put this in a nice little box, push it away from us? And I think the issue here is the police levels are low. We've got some of the, I think with that, in Europe, not in the EU, but about 36 countries, we're down there about 32nd. Our manning levels of police per 100,000 people is low in the country overall. So we have circumstances where the police have to prioritise what they are actually, their activities, and what they actually select as important crime. Now there has to be some issue where, when they're actually doing this prioritisation, organisations such as councils, which have local contacts, we have information, and even in the council's reply there, he suggested that when you contacted the supermarket, another instance, they're responding quickly. So why are we not, as a council, actually setting up officers, some structure which would possibly not be particularly costly, but would actually then help reduce the activities the police have to be involved? Because there is an issue here. If you cut police and they have to prioritise what they're doing, there has to then be consideration of who other organisations actually get themselves involved to stop problems. So obviously we oppose. Thank you.
Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Mills raised the issue about being on private land, that the intervention of the council. But let's just take a picture of what should happen if during that time or any time that something like that should happen in a private land and somebody got killed. Who then are responsible? Is it not us as responsible residents? The police as responsible residents? It's all of us. So when something like this that is affecting our community, and it will become an epidemic in our community if we continue to say it's private land, then what sort of reassurance will be given to our residents that we are taking responsibility in looking after each other? So please, let's not make this thing into a party political thing. This is to do with our residents. Let's look after our residents. Let's show our residents that we are concerned about the issues that's happening within our community, and we can work collectively to get it resolved. And that's what we're asking for, working collectively as a unit, as community members, as members of the council, working together. Let's put the party bits aside, because at the end of the day, it's not the party, it's we that's letting our residents down. So please, let's work collectively together.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Allen.
Mr Mayor, I'm not sure if some of the Cabinet members know how supermarkets operate. When a supermarket is built and they deal with all the health and safety issues, they appoint a key holder. That key holder liaises with the council and the police, everyone else, to say if there's an issue, this is the person you contact. As I understand it, nobody contacted anybody that night until Cllr Dhillon was calling the police. Did the police contact the supermarket that night? No. But what I find is even more worrying is right next to that, as the superstore, there's a petrol station, a self-service petrol station. And if a spark had gone, there would have been injuries, there would have been fatalities. And yet nobody informed the fire brigade, the ambulance service. Okay, we were lucky that night. That night they had their fun and they went. But if, and I say if, that ever happens again, and I stand here in this council chamber and I'm told it's not our issue, it's on private land. Well, I'm sorry, this council has a duty of care towards every single resident, and they should deal with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Allen. Councillor Palmer.
I rise to speak for the first time in this chamber. Let's be perfectly clear here. This council, this side of the chamber, is absolutely passionate about antisocial behaviour. I live in a ward which is wrecked by motorcycles. It's like the 24-hour TT race. I was present
Councillor
today.
Palmer, through me, please.
I beg your pardon, Mr. Mayor. I was present today at the Safer Hillingdon Partnership where we talk about things like this. And Councillor Mills has said that this was brought up with the new BCU chief. They have acknowledged that something is going to be done about it. So I'm not quite sure why, when we are actually agreeing that something needs to be done about it, and it is as clear as the nose on my face what we are going to do about it, why there is so much discussion. We are a council that do things properly. What we are looking for, yes, you may laugh, what we are looking for here is clear guidance as to how we can deal with it. It's quite clear if it's in a car park that we have nothing to do. We've got difficulties there. What we're not saying is we're not going to deal with it. It's quite clear that what we're asking for here is a friendly amendment so that we can actually deal with it and deal with it properly. Because if we all come in with our own ideas, it's not going to work. As I say, this administration works with clear guidelines, clear boundaries, and this is what this friendly amendment is saying.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. Councillor Curling, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In reality, I don't think there's a huge amount of difference between the two sides of the chamber on this. The reason that we don't consider the amendment to be as friendly as it could be is because what we are really looking for is a joint multi-agency approach. That may be what the amendment is trying to get at, but it's not particularly that clear. What all of us to some extent has faced, but particularly Councillor Dhillon and Councillor Gardner, is this huge antisocial behaviour. You go to the council say it's the police. You go to the police, they say it's the council. You then get told it's actually the supermarket, and then it's the landowner. And all these things are all happening in, you're being batted from pillar to post, basically. So what this motion was intended to do was say, yes, part of it is the police responsibility, part is the landowner, part is the council's responsibility. So let's all get together and sort this problem out. Reading the amendment, that may be the intention, but reading the amendment, it reads, particularly to those that are really passionate about this and been dealing with this and lost sleep over it, it just looks like we're saying, well, that's not our problem, it's the police. And that's what the motion is trying to prevent, because if we don't all work together, that's what happens. It just gets passed from one to the other to the other. So I believe the intentions of the amendment are friendly, but the actual wording of it, and under the circumstances, I don't think we can consider it to be friendly or as friendly as it could be. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Curling. Do we have any other speakers? No? Okay. Councillor Dhillon, please.
Councillor Curling read my speech out. I appreciate it's a friendly amendment. I just think you're going around it the wrong way in some terms. Yeah, okay, give it to the guys at the top, and they will pass it down to another guy who's dealing with. It's an under-resourced department we know. They'll pass it on to someone who's dealing with knife crime, so they'll put it away and give it to somebody else. Somebody else will deal with it, and they're dealing with drug crime, and so it will get passed to somebody else. It will get dealt with when they can deal with it. What I'm asking for in my motion is for a ground level discussion, and it can be solved much quicker. We solved that ASDA issue within 2 days. That'll get you. So I agree. The wording of the amendment. You know, when I first saw it, I thought it was an unfriendly amendment. It's pushing it up to the top, pushing the problem away. I get what you're saying now, but that amendment doesn't read that way to me. Unfortunately, we solved that issue very, very quickly. I've been asking about the land. I'll sort it out myself, this issue at ASDA, and I'll help out anybody else. Once we learn from the lessons from it, if an officer could give me, and they will have that information about who owns that land, I would have contacted the landowner, told them what they need to do, and resolved it. We face that issue every single day. ASDA resolved their bit, but it's not over, because there's still the landowner, British Steel Pension Fund, still have to deal with the rest of it. And then only we have to deal with Botwell Ward. There are issues all over the place on it. The PSBO, how's that going to be enforced? By who? We've got one SNT member in Pinkwell. We've got one in Botwell. 101's 20 minutes. 999 won't come out. So I know we're trying to do a lot, but if we all talk to each other, officers engage, we all engage, we're all trying to do the same thing. I don't know what I'm going to do with this amendment. I appreciate it's friendly. I just don't know what I'm going to do with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dhillon. Councillor Douglas Mills.
Mr. Mayor, it's the most friendly amendment they're ever going to get from me. So, and I appreciate that Councillor Dhillon recognises it as friendly, even if his leader is unable to come to that conclusion. This is the deal. This is how it's going to be, because this is the best way of actually working through the issue. The local authority has no powers to deal with anything criminal. It needs the police to deal with that aspect. The local authority has powers to deal with antisocial behaviour. Some of those powers are slow and clunky and take time to implement and are very frustrating for all of our residents. The police, if they see criminality, have a power straight away. That is the difference. This is working together. This is making sure that actually we will be able to argue that maybe we can get even more police resources back to Hillingdon. I don't want to make the political point, but for the record, since the mayor changed into Sadiq, we've had less police in Hillingdon. And one of the things that we need to do, and I'm just telling you it as it is, that's the fact. You can find the information yourself, but I'm saving you time. And also, in terms of correction of facts, Councillor Morse made a comment with the emotion of the occasion that he was trying to do, that the workload of him as a Pinkwell councillor for members' inquiries had been going up. Page 64 of tonight's agenda will show that that is fake news. I suggest we support the amendment, because that's what's going to happen.
Point of information, Mr. Mayor, I was not referring to that report. I was reporting to the contact levels between us and visitors by emails.
Right, we go to the vote. All those in favour of the amendment, please. And against?
Mr. Mayor, that amendment is carried and becomes the substantive motion shown in the centre in italics on page 5, to which other amendments may be moved. If you ask if there are any other amendments, if not, then we vote on the substantive motion.
Any other speakers? No? Okay, so we're voting on the substantive. All those in favour? And against? As carried. Now to 7.4, Councillor Curling, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The plight of the Battle of Britain Club first appeared on the radar, and excuse the pun, during the last local election campaign. And although I was keen to try and help and support the club, it was not appropriate to bring the club into the political arena at that time. The election is now over and the club is on the verge of extinction. So I bring this motion to Council with no party political agenda, but in the hope that we can give all party support to any initiative that may help this much valued community facility continue to serve the residents that we were all elected to serve. The history of the club is well documented, and its heritage, along with all of that of the former RAF site, is certainly a huge contributing factor to the proud history of our town and our borough. The club has also been a focal point for community organisations and groups, as well as a venue for a range of events and celebrations. The extensive development of the RAF site, with enough new homes to create a new community alongside the Battle of Britain Club, plus the Bunker Museum and Visitor Centre, as well as the 48-acre park, means that the club is has a very promising future and every possibility of increasing its membership, its use and its general profitability. I know that there's a debt that needs to be repaid, but a good business plan and support from the council and the community at large, the prospects for the club to turn its debt into profit is endless. I'm sure that visitors who come to the bunker or just want to visit the site that was once home to some of our proudest moments in history, where people like Sir Douglas Mills, T. Lawrence, aka Lawrence of Arabia, once occupied the site, then a visit to the Battle of Britain Club can only add to the authenticity of any visit and maintain some of the proud heritage that could otherwise be lost. Mr. Mayor, I would pay tribute to the volunteers and the committee members of the club who have, over the years, fought so hard for its survival. They have shown tremendous loyalty to the community, and as Sir Douglas Mills once said, I think the greatest of all human virtues is loyalty. It embraces all the best of the human character, courage, faith, love and charity. I therefore move this motion in the sincere hope that party politics can be put to one side and that the council that was elected by the local community can support the community and show the same loyalty by putting our residents first and supporting this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Curling. Do we have a seconder, please? Councillor Morgan.
Mr. Mayor. The Council recently decided that risk assessments were needed for the premises that housed the Battle of Britain Club. Reports confirmed the buildings were not safe for use. The building did not meet fire safety, and the cost of bringing the current building to a modern standard would be so expensive that demolition of the current building was the cheapest option. It highlighted the need for investment and for a new building to be constructed. This occurred in rather suspicious circumstances when the club suddenly received demands for rent from Dio, who managed properties on behalf of the MOD. It was announced that the club had not paid any rent since 2004 all of a sudden. It appears that in 2017 the club received a report from Arizona Management Services that the club had a total debt of $266,955 and a turnover of 144k and an income of 14k. The club confirmed that they had not received a notice of eviction from them or any lease invoices for the past 16 years. Strange. The key here is the club really needs time to respond to this financial storm. No opportunity for fundraising or time for the public to respond. The club has existed for 71 years and is indeed part of the heritage of the borough. This is a charity that supports the RF family and should benefit in its development in association with the Uxbridge bunker site. And we will point out some of the amounts of money that have been provided for that particular resource. I'm a strong advocate of safety policies. However, I do not agree that we cannot find a solution to the difficult circumstances that the club to some degree has inherited. The problem for the club is they need time to formulate a plan to resolve the investment requirements and increase income if the MOD is seeking a high rental income from the land. Is the prospect of yet another sale of land for income for the MOD a driving force to balance the financial costs? This is indeed a short-term policy, as eventually no land will be available for further sale. I do urge the leader of the council to attempt some of the mediation on this problem. I ask for your council's support on this motion. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Mayor, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Mills. I think I might bring in £10 for the Mayor's charity next time. Councillor Allen, please.
A lot of what I was going to say has already been said, but I will keep it brief, providing the other side behave themselves. Hillingdon has a proud history of supporting the men and women of the armed forces. Anyone a few weeks ago looking outside would see the parade, everyone waving. Many, when they finished their service, stayed and built their homes close to the RAF in Uxbridge, or visit regularly for a catch-up. Sadly, much of the camp area, only a little of the camp area has survived, the bunker being one. And there's money been invested in it to ensure its future, and so that children of the future can see, what battles were fought, and hopefully history won't repeat itself. The Rafa hut is a treasure, but it's fared less well because of the ownership issue, but it is worth saving. And if anybody thought of a good marketing plan to join it with the bunker, there could be children's visiting there, because the history in that building can never be replaced. It is not the wit of the council to see this as a jewel in the crown, and marketed properly will bring lots of visitors in. There is enough area there for coaches for schools, and they will come from all around if there is something available. Food at the end of the day, a picnic area, you name it, that could be a money maker. And it wouldn't interfere with the two shopping malls that, they'd like their visitors to pop into. We have a rough idea of the costings, and we've just been told about the debt that they didn't even know about, which I find rather curious. Why all of a sudden the eyes come on the debt? Or are they looking at profitability of the land and not putting the residents first? This council wants to spend millions on a police building that is seldom open to the public. And it is seldom open to the public. It is not. I phoned up, I found a set of keys, and I asked if I could take them to Uxbridge where I found them. And the advice I was given is Uxbridge is not open. Not open for handing keys.
Is this relevant to the...
Yeah, no, well, when I'm listening to their
Can we come back to the motion, please?
Now, if this council can offer to spend millions to have a police station that they can't afford to fill, why don't this council use a little bit of their money to...
Thank you very much, Councillor Allen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Puddifoot.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand that on the direction of the Royal Air Force Association, the club has closed this week and the lease has been surrendered to the MOD. Suffice to say, our support for our military residents, past and present, and our military heritage is well documented and well known. The Royal Air Force Association, who are a reputable charity, were of the opinion that having assessed all the facts, and there are lots of facts here, that this club was not viable due to insurmountable debts and the dilapidated condition of the building. Their conclusion, together with a number of other concerns, led me to decide that as a council, on this occasion, we would not get involved in the various disputes relating to the reasons that this club had failed. And there are many reasons that this club has failed. But we will not be getting involved with this. It has closed on the instructions of the Royal Air Force Association, who we have a great deal of time for, and the lease has been surrendered to the MOD. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Puddifoot. Do we have any other speakers? No? Okay. Cllr Curling, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was hoping that after such a rough ride on these motions and political kickabout that this would have been one that we could have agreed on, but sadly we can't. I appreciate what the Leader of the Council has said, but the spirit of the motion is really to try and intervene and undercut that and look after the residents and the local community that use that facility, because there's a number of clubs and groups that use that facility that are now got nowhere to meet, and it's I just thought the Leader of the Council could use his good offices to try and broker some sort of deal, some sort of but it was not to be. So sad to say the local community will lose out, but we're not in control of the council, unfortunately. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Curling. Okay, so there's no other speakers. Those in favour of the motion, show hands, please. And against? Motion is lost. We now go on to motion 7.5. Councillor Money.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to bring this motion to full council. I'm here not only representing the residents of Heathrow villages, but also the 66% of Hillingdon residents who were opposed to Heathrow expansion. Unfortunately, Parliament voted in favour of the government's national policy statement on Heathrow expansion. The vote, which was won by 415 to 119, was extremely disappointed. MPs throughout the country were duped into false promises that it will create thousands of jobs and benefit the entire country, yet no consideration was given to the human cost that it would have on local communities. When the evidence is added up, it shows that Heathrow will be a costly mistake, bringing no benefit for UK business connectivity and ignoring the effects on public health from noise and air pollution. We will have displaced communities, loss of schools, loss of homes in the villages where my friends and family live and the community I proudly represent. It has been reported that 40,000 deaths a year are linked to air pollution, and that around 400 schools across London, are exceeding legal air pollution limits. Just a few days ago, we heard about the sad death of Ella, a 9-year-old girl who resided near the South Circular Road. It was concluded that there was a link between her emergency hospital admissions and the recorded spikes in nitrogen oxide and PM10, the most noxious of pollutants. Heathrow expansion, and I don't think the MPs considered this, will bring a gridlock to the local area, an area that already has one of the greatest levels of air pollution, and where residents who are not under the compulsory purchase zone will have to live as they will not be able to sell if expansion was to go ahead. I was also there when Boris Johnson, MP for Uxbridge and South Ruislip, said that he would lie down in front of bulldozers to prevent the expansion of Heathrow. He didn't even bother to turn up for the vote. There was no valid reason for him to miss such a crucial issue, as the government controls the parliamentary agenda and also Boris's diary. The government have deliberately gone out of their way to give Boris a way to escape his responsibility to represent the residents of Uxbridge and South Ruislip. Nick Hurd MP stated that he also opposed expansion of Heathrow as it made no sense. Where was he on the night of the vote, and why has his position changed? It is fair to say that the residents of Uxbridge and South Ruislip and Ruislip, Northwood and Pinner were not represented in the House of Commons on the evening of the debate, and it is clear that both MPs care more about their personal political careers than that of the residents they claim to represent. Only one Hillingdon MP, namely John McDonnell, was there for the vote and has consistently voted against Heathrow expansion no matter what, and will actually stand up for all of the residents throughout Hillingdon. Ladies and gentlemen, the fight is not over. A cross-coalition of councils and the Mayor of London will bring a legal challenge to the High Court in the coming weeks. Hillingdon Council will help lead on this, and I am convinced that just like before, we will win the legal challenge and end this saga once and for all. That is why it is imperative that we have MPs in Hillingdon who actually represent their residents and put their residents first. Otherwise, it is just embarrassing for the current administration, for the council, and empty words for us to say that we are exposed to expansion. Actions speak louder than words. I therefore move that this council expresses its disappointment that Boris Johnson MP and Nick Head MP didn't stand by their election pledges to put our residents first and vote against the third runway at Heathrow. This council calls upon the Leader of the Council to use his influence to persuade Boris Johnson and Nick Head to consider their positions do the honourable thing and resign to make way for MPs who will put residents before their own self-interest. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Money. Do we have a seconder, please?
I
Councillor
second it.
Nelson.
Mr. Mayor, and reserve my rights.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Dennis, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be voting against this motion, it's been a long evening, this motion for 3 reasons. Firstly, it is hypocritical. Secondly, it is arrogant. And most importantly, it is completely meaningless. Firstly, let's talk about hypocrisy. I'm sure it won't have slipped your attention, Mr. Mayor, that the Labour Group's motion only targets the Conservative MPs. What I would like to know is why John McDonnell's missed off the motion. OK, on the face of it, he voted against the expansion of Heathrow, so this might seem like a good reason. But I'm afraid, Mr. Mayor, the Labour Group have missed something very important that happened in Parliament on the 25th of June. The Labour Party voted for Heathrow expansion. Let me repeat, it is National Labour Party policy to build a 3rd runway. And who is the second most powerful person in the Labour Party? Or maybe the 3rd most powerful if you count Len McCluskey? Yes, it's John McDonnell. What is the point of grabbing a placard, standing with residents whose houses will be destroyed, and then once you enter the Palace of Westminster, not using all your power to continue fighting for them? In the morning, John McDonnell was telling Heathrow villagers how much he cared about the destruction of their community. I saw it on the news. But in the afternoon, he told his Labour MPs that he didn't care how they voted on the destruction of Longford or Harmondsworth. He gave them a free vote. Well, that vote was not free for those residents. So why don't I try and amend this motion? Because fundamentally, it is not right for Hillingdon Council to tell people who their elected representatives should be. Our MPs, like we councillors, explain what we do and what we'd like to do, then each voter makes their own decision. Boris Johnson and Nick Hurd have made a good case for why abstaining will allow them to have the best chance to influence what happens next. Now, I know that Labour councillors, Mr. Mayor, won't agree with me on this, but that's okay. During the next election campaign, we'll all make our arguments and the electorate will then decide what is what. It is arrogant to think that Hillingdon Council should tell people whether this voting decision is right or wrong. And the 3rd reason why I'll be voting against this motion is it does absolutely nothing to help our residents. Ultimately, what matters in politics is what you do. I'm proud that Hillingdon Conservatives have always done everything to fight for our residents, and as our leader has explained, this real concrete action will continue. So when each of us on this side of the chamber votes against it, we'll do so knowing that we can stand tall when telling residents about what we have done for them. If the Labour Group wants to make Heathrow expansion a political battleground, I say bring it on. But actually what I prefer is if Hillingdon Labour drop the party politics, go on, have fun tonight, but not too much fun because I want to get home, gain your momentum bonus points, but then it'd be great if tomorrow you united with us to fight against the 3rd runway, because that's what our residents really want.
Thank you, Councillor Dennis. Councillor Dhillon, please.
Sorry, it's his fault. And it's me again. And you know you're in trouble when Lloyd says you again. Mr. Mayor, Monday, 28th of June, 2018. Really a disappointing day for the London Borough of Hillingdon. And it's great, Councillor Dennis, you spoke about, I think it's great that we're all sitting here in this chamber supporting each other against the 3rd runway. Cross-party, we're all united to fight the proposed runway. We even have 3 MPs, well, 1 MP who will stand up time and time again against the Heathrow proposals. We must also thank those who supported us and voted against the 3rd runway, those councils who will stand with us, thank the Mayor of London for the fight against the 3rd runway. It's not that the government who were in opposition, when they were against in opposition, it's not them who pulled forward a vote ahead of the climate change report, not even the debt that makes funding the 3rd runway taxpayers' burden, the pollution levels, traffic, all that we've heard in the past, and no doubt will continue to hear, that I feel so angry about. It's 415 MPs who have not shown that they care about any of those things. They have the audacity to stand in Parliament on such pledges and then vote against the very thing that they tell us are at the core of their beliefs. I have utter contempt for all of those, for all of them, for all of those reasons, whichever party they're in. We should openly challenge them, irrespective of their political persuasion. Those in the north of England really do need to think on, and I'm referring to their MPs, about what that vote meant for their constituents. It's a cost to them. £450. We don't even spend, as a nation, we spend hardly anything in the north on transport infrastructure. Therefore, my disgust and absolute disgraceful abstentions of Boris Johnson and Nick Hurd from the vote means I have wholeheartedly to support this motion. Because on the behalf of each resident of Hillingdon, we must. I'm not going to go into where Boris was or whereabouts of where he was and what he will do. But it's where is the integrity of these people to stand up, canvass, saying one thing and then not show up. That's what I find deplorable. I wouldn't want them in my penalty shootout. No way. Apathy amongst voters, young not interested in voting, you can't blame them when you have hypocrites like that in Parliament. I support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Dhillon. Councillor Milani.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was sat in the viewing gallery in the Houses of Commons nearly 2 weeks ago as MPs debated the National Policy Statement on Heathrow expansion. And I saw firsthand how Member of Parliament after Member of Parliament bought the fairy tale of jobs, of growth, of the illusion of greater connectivity. I watched on as they abandoned commitments to climate change, abdicated responsibility on air and noise pollution, and sold out our communities. I'm really glad that a member of this council in this debate said, what matters is what you do. Because at the end of that debate, one of the members of the House joked about the elephant in the room, the fact that our local MP, Boris Johnson and Nick Hurd, one of them who claimed to lie in front of a bulldozer to stop expansion, was not there. They laughed. We did not. We didn't laugh, Mr. Mayor, because plainly put, it's not a laughing matter. It is no joke that out of the 3 MPs in our borough, only one was bothered to show up for the vote. What you do matters. It's not funny because, plainly, Boris Johnson and Nick Hurd have betrayed our community. One has run off to Afghanistan, and the other, we have no idea where he is. And while this might have the ingredients of a comedy sketch, the results on our residents is not funny. I and many of my colleagues here today were also at a community meeting in the villages the Friday following the vote. And we've heard and felt the pain and frustration of the people, the real people, who will see their lives upended. This is not an issue of political planning. It is not a lose the battle, win the war. It is an issue of trust. When a servant of the public, whether in this chamber or in the Houses of Parliament, makes a promise, it should mean something. There has to be a point when a Member of Parliament so readily lies and betrays his constituents that this council and those in the constituency can simply say, you're fired. I've heard and read members of this council say that expansion of Heathrow is not a party political issue. I know what many of your reactions would have been if John McDonnell had not been in that vote. I and residents in our borough now look to this council to call on Boris Johnson and Nick Hurd to do what is right. Resign.
Thank you very much, Councillor Milani. Could you switch your mic off, please?
Absolutely.
Councillor Sansapori, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last week, Boris Johnson betrayed the residents of Hillingdon by not being here and voting against the third runway at Heathrow. Many residents who live in the Uxbridge wanted to speak to Mr. Johnson about the third runway, but found that he has no local office, no staff in Uxbridge, where they could speak with him, and felt that he was very removed from them as a resident. He should have been in touch with the people, assuring them that he would be in the Parliament and voting against the runway. The third runway issue is one of the largest issues to face the borough and the country, yet Boris, who said that he will lay down in the front of bulldozer to prevent a third runway being built, was not even here to vote. How can he believe anything he says when he does not result into actions? The people of Uxbridge and South Ruislip were expecting him to stand like a man of principle and represent them on this and fight for their interest. And he did not do this, and now they know the man and feel betrayed by him. The Tories are raising such hue and cry over saving Uxbridge Police Stations, yet they will not even ensure that MPs here to vote on such a critical matter to the borough. Hillingdon deserve MPs who take their message and entrust to Westminster, not an MP who flee the country to avoid standing up for and letting down his residents. Hillingdon deserve an MP who doesn't value cabinet jobs over representing and standing up for their residents. Of the three Hillingdon MPs, only John MacDonald stood up in the Parliament to defend and fight for residents of this borough. Labour was there for Hillingdon when Tories were not. Hillingdon deserves more fearless and brave MP like John MacDonald. Mr. Mayor, local Tories share equal responsibility for Mr. Johnson's betrayal, as they are the people who helped to parachute him into Uxbridge. Uxbridge and South Ruislip deserve a local leader who will defend the people of Uxbridge and of Hillingdon, who will stand up in the Parliament and defend us, not run away to avoid his responsibility. I support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sansapuri. Cllr Allen again.
Proud. Mr. Mayor, if their whip can't keep them in control, can you take them outside and deal with them, please? Boris Johnson bungee jumped into Uxbridge because it served his purpose. For no other reason. He had no love of the people of Hayes, because clearly by his actions he shows his distaste for us. And let's be clear, the Conservatives have control of this government, and they had the numbers that night, regardless of whether some of our Labour MPs voted, and shame on them for doing so. Boris's only claim to fame is constantly trying to build bridges. And I think he's yet to succeed on one, but I think he needs to build some bridges for the people of Uxbridge, but I don't think that's going to be a success neither. Councillor Denny, those other MPs are not our concern in this chamber at the moment, because we are talking about Boris Johnson and his friend, Mr. Hurd. Both of them scuttled off into the dark, one to Afghanistan and the other one, well, lost in space probably somewhere, because we haven't been told where, and the residents, and it took ages to get an answer. Mr. Johnson and Hurd need to hang their heads in shame, but I don't think they will, because Boris Johnson, like the typical jovial, silly man that he is, bounces back and idiots vote for him. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Allen. Could you switch your mic off, please, sir? Councillor Puddifoot, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Whilst I appreciate that both Hillingdon Labour Group and the National Labour Party rightly fear Boris Johnson as a political opponent on Brexit or other matters, using the topic of Heathrow expansion to suggest that the best course of action for one of the strongest and most outspoken critics of Heathrow expansion should resign as an MP makes playground politics look positively mature. We have a Labour group who in 2016 said they could not agree with the expansion of Gatwick rather than Heathrow. How do they equate that to putting their residents first rather than their trade union masters? Such pathetic representation of our residents, by the logic of their motion tonight, should have seen every Labour councillor resign for not putting their residents first. Their complete ability to deal with the bully boy tactics of Heathrow Limited, threatening to close the airport and be led by the nose into making it a political issue, was seen by Hillingdon residents as nonsense, and we increased our majority at the May 2014 election. As I said earlier tonight, I spoke to both Boris and Nick ahead of the NPS vote and advised them both to continue representing their constituents and their country, be it on not supporting an expanded Heathrow or supporting our attempt to do something about improving policing in Hillingdon. Reducing the government majority from 296 to 294 would have made no difference. Mr Mayor, over many years this administration has supported the fight against Heathrow expansion, providing funding for legal challenges, residents groups opposed to expansion and the No Third Runway Parliamentary Coalition Group, and we will continue to do so. This is a battle for the health and well-being of our residents and our environment, and it is far too important to make silly political knockabout points. During the years that we have opposed the third runway, the Labour group have demonstrated time and time again, as they are tonight, that they are following a different agenda, and that is regrettable, but not surprising. Accordingly, we will move on, working with representatives of all political colours or none that understand the importance of this issue, and the folly of this type of silly squabbling, which is exactly what Heathrow Limited want to see. Hillingdon Conservatives, local and national, will continue to put residents first, and we will again defeat the expansion proposal, however long it takes and however much it costs. There will be no bulldozers at Heathrow for anybody to lay down in front of, so the thrust of a Labour motion is simply not relevant, and it is really, really disappointing that they have again broken faith with us on this issue, and long may they live to regret that.
Thank you, Councillor Puddifoot. Councillor Curling, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. To tackle that last statement from the Leader of the Council, we haven't lost faith with him at all. We fully support the administration in their fight against Heathrow expansion. But I think we need to just dispel some of these myths, really, and concentrate on why it is so important that Boris Johnson and Nick Hurd have been there to vote, regardless of the result. First of all, a councillor, I think it was Councillor Dennis, said that Labour Party policy is in favour. It isn't. National Labour Party policy is against expansion because it has not met the 4 tests. The constant throwing of Gatwick at us, the Leader of the Council is well aware that the reason we we didn't vote against, we abstained, was because this council has no powers to impose anything on the people who live around Gatwick. Totally inappropriate for us to impose something that we don't want on somebody else's backyard when there are similar residents groups who are protesting against expansion at Gatwick. The important thing is to look after the people of Hillingdon, not damage somebody else. So he was well aware of why we couldn't support this council saying Gatwick should be expanded. Also, what he also fails to mention is we put forward an amendment that would strengthen the reason for Heathrow to be refused over around environmental issues. So instead of saying we don't want a third runway at Heathrow, but let's have one at Gatwick, we try to amend that motion to say we don't want a third runway here because it will be so environmentally damaging. Now, that party voted against that. So I do think they should get off their high horse. I would also say that if they believe that Gatwick should be expanded, then the people that can make that decision are the MPs. So why has Nick Hurd and Boris Johnson run away from a vote that would have allowed them to have voted against Heathrow, but say, actually, guys, Gatwick is a much better solution? So I really do think, on the actual issue, we are at one. But when it comes to these MPs, and also the unions, some of our members have actually resigned their union membership out of disgust because we are totally against that. They're living in a fallacy, living in a wonderland. And the Labour MPs that voted in favour of the third runway, we condemn them as well. So on the issue, there's no difference. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At Heathrow and the surrounding areas around the airport, far and wide afield, the air pollution is toxic. It is over and above the level of the World Health Organization recommendation that any human can endure. And our residents are rightfully angry at the prospect of losing their homes. The area will be losing 3 schools, which we can't afford to lose, as there is already problem in finding school places for our children in schools and around the borough. The one and only community centre in the village will be gone. And what used to be a beautiful village with life is now blighted, and now the go-ahead has been given for the expansion of Heathrow, where the noise level will increase, traffic will increase, and don't believe what the airport is saying that the aircraft will be less noisy. A machine that has to run on fuel, there will always be noise. And pollution in the area, what can I say? That has already been addressed by the World Health Organization. And now when the time has come for our residents to get the support from the MP, who have pledged in 2015, when he was Mayor of London, to lie in front of a bulldozer, to stop the expansion going ahead at Heathrow. And this is what he said, I quote, "I will lie down in front of those bulldozers and stop the construction of the 3rd runway going ahead." That's his words, not mine. Yet on the day for him to show his support for his constituents, that he is a man of his word, what did he do? Hide himself out of the country. Yet he knew that this vote was a crucial vote for all the residents in the borough of Hillingdon. And he flunked it, as he always does. And we all know he did. So I urge you, Mr. Puddifoot, I know you said you have given them the support, but I was hoping that I can urge you for you to use your influence and say to Mr. Johnson and Mr. Hurd, resign as MP for Uxbridge, Ruislip and Pinner. Just like the ex-minister, Mr. Greg Hands, and he was true to his word, and he resigned and left the government, that residents can trust to put their constituency first instead of his own self-interest. So I'm going to ask you, even though you've said that you told them you support them, please do the honourable thing and tell him to resign.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Morse.
I'll be quick. Essentially, I tend to agree with Councillor Dhillon, is Parliament did not assess the risk of this project. The actual company held was £14 billion. It's very near within 5% of its maximum borrowing limits, and it has to build a runway which is at least 14 billion and probably 18 billion. So I'm in line with Councillor Dhillon. This problem has not been analysed. However, I'll go on to the key point, the second point in this motion. And the question I ask, because I watch QC's debate sometimes, and the question I would ask is, when is a vote in Parliament a pointless gesture? And I will argue never. If I had the privilege to represent the constituency, and I had my supporters, I had beliefs, they wanted some issue, I would always vote. I would tell them why I didn't vote, if I was voting for it and against it, but I would never not vote. And this is, I think this is the key point, where what we are saying is we represent this borough, and we're taking the issue and we're saying we actually feel that 2 of our MPs actually decided that voting in Parliament was pointless, and we totally disagree with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Morse. Do we have any other speakers? No? So back to Councillor Money, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to address some of the points that Councillor Puddifoot and Councillor Dennis have raised. It's no surprise that the party on the other side brought up the motion which committed the Council to support a second runway at Gatwick. We found this unacceptable at the time, and we find it unacceptable now. Some of you may be familiar with HACAN, who helped lead us to victory last time. HACAN's Victory Against All Odds, which was written by its chair, shows that plans for massive expansion were previously stopped, and I quote, "We had to make it clear that none of us was in the business of suggesting that expansion would take place at somebody else's airport. This had happened in the past, it had led to failure, and quite rightly, campaigners had been called NIMBYs. I suppose that's what the Tories are." I would also like to say that it was the Tories that used divisive tactics to make gains, to try and make gains in the villages, but it backfired on them, and the residents saw past their lies. It was the Tories that did that, not Labour. I would just like to reaffirm that it is all well and good that we are sitting in this chamber and at a local party level we oppose expansion, but the same cannot be said out of two of the three MPs. I am sure John Randall, the previous MP, would have voted against the third runway, just like he voted with John McDonnell to oppose against Iraq. I hope that everyone in this chamber supports this motion, as I believe that only then will we be putting our residents first. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Money. Right, we go to the vote, please. Hands up, please, in favour of the motion. And against, please. Motion is lost. Just before I close the meeting, I'd just like to say well done to everyone here that's done their debut speech. Thank you very much. Your maiden speech. Thank you. Meeting closed.